great. Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds super good. Okay. So we're live. This is exciting. I have Brienne with me today talking from, Wellness Mama Bree's her Instagram
Yeah.
handle, like username. And I want her to tell you all about her practice. I actually am not familiar with all the ins and outs of clients and seeing clients and all that. She's starting her own podcast. So this is super exciting. We're going to be talking about this, but y'all know that I preach minerals. Like it's basically all I talk about. Every time I talk about it, helping things from morning sickness to raising your vibration to getting through postpartum depression, which was the initial way I kind of launched a following on Instagram. I have just thousands of women come out of the woodworks on each side. Some are like ready to try it, so ready to be free. Others are like, you're crazy. I've been told the diagnosis is by my doctor and I'm just chemically born this way. So I had that story as well. And we'll probably get deep into that, but this is just the intro. But I would like Brienne to tell you guys about herself, her practice. And she was just filling me in. We are going to do a deep dive. She comes from the functional med mineral world. And we're going to do a deep dive into how she bridged some gaps with German new medicine, which is what I'm so excited about. So tell us about yourself, and then we will have a deep conversation about this.
Yeah, of course. So thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So my background is in functional medicine, nutrition, looking at minerals. I went through RCP, so I did extensive training with root cause protocol with Morley Robbins, and
Okay.
I did more training within minerals, and the traditional world just did not make sense to me with meds, right? Like with medication.
Yeah.
And I started that from a really early age and just started questioning things. Things just didn't make sense to me. I was really into the anatomy of the body. And I was just really excited to get deeper into these things. So as I got older, I gave myself permission to actually step outside of the norm. As a child that had a lot of health anxiety and really bad issues with doctors growing up, I got to a point where I just totally ditched everything that I thought that I knew. And so I'm kind of addicted to keep doing that. So anything that I find that I feel resonates with me and my clients and everything that I'm working on, I really kind of just have a scratch that I have to itch, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm really, really into it. So anyway, I started out with minerals and nutrition, and even the holistic nutrition world is just, it was so boring to me. I was like, this just doesn't make any sense. And we're not getting anywhere, like, okay, so you're giving me a diagnosis or you're just telling me to eat a certain diet plan. And I didn't feel like that it fits the mold, but it didn't make sense, right? It didn't make sense with me or my body or my clients. And so I kind of ditched that right away. When I found RCP and learned about minerals, I'm like, okay, that makes more sense. Okay, I'm getting somewhere. Like that's getting me where I kind of need to go. I'm understanding how minerals balance and they're the foundation of our health. And we're super depleted in minerals. So went down the same rabbit hole as everybody else. Oh, seed oils are so bad, and all these GMOs and all these really bad foods. We need to stay away from all these certain things and plastics and chemicals and all this fear, right? All this fear based around medicine and nutrition. Holistic world can be like this really big rabbit hole, right?
Oh, yes. The holistic world is crazy. It's full of chaos.
Too much.
I mean, it's so funny. I mean, I see a couple trends there that are the problem in my eyes. One is just the provider idols. Like we know all about it. I talk about provider idols all the time. Like people who are like, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm the authority. Like a big foundation of my practice is obviously that we're made in the image of God. We can heal. That's the deal. And so teaching people like to stop disconnecting from themselves, but be able to follow advice or be able to, take permission to not follow advice, or just see things from a peace and chaos standpoint. Like if somebody is selling you something based on you're in fear, like I'm like hard stop. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because fear is depleting. Like it's like, that's
What's the point?
overarching idea, right?
Yeah.
Like I see that in
Game
I have to
over.
restrain myself on Instagram from saying names because it's rampant. It's like we've got somebody with like 300,000 followers telling people like, pictures of the world burning down and we should be afraid and this environment's all broken. And I'm like, how can we simultaneously hate the environment without hating our bodies? Because if we're made in the image of God and God is the environment. And I probably bring this up on every podcast because I'm so passionate about that reconnection. And even that thought pattern, I can't wait to hear what you say about that from German New Medicine, but that thought pattern is depleting.
Yeah, definitely. So from the holistic standpoint of like minerals, right? Iron is attracted by fear. And so if we attract iron, we're actually getting really rusty inside. So it's actually a really bad thing. It depletes copper, and we need copper to be bioavailable to do anything in the body at period, like at all, hard stop. And so if we don't have that, then we're just running in this circle that we're never going to get off of this little rat race that we're on. Right. And so fear attracts iron. We got to get away from fear. We got to step away from that. So I can't tell you how many clients I get come to me. They're just straight up fear. We have to work on that first. Like we're talking like quicksand fear, right?
Yeah.
Of symptoms, because they're just so afraid of the symptom. So German New Medicine gave me that perspective of understanding, oh my gosh, it's flipped, right? So every single thing that we thought was bad is actually good. So when we're going through the healing phase, we're seeing the symptoms, right? Yeah. That's totally different from what we've been taught. We've been taught the complete opposite. Be afraid of your symptoms. There's something that you can do. You're not doing the right thing. There's so much devaluation in that. Like, what did I do wrong? Oh, I'm in a moldy home. I'm consuming seed oils. I'm doing all of these things. And so you're in that trap. Like you are in the quicksand and you are taken under really quickly. So I spend 100%. A lot of my time getting my clients out of that first.
I know I have so many questions. Okay. So just on that like topic, what to explain to me iron being attracted by fear? Because I am genuinely curious how you figured that out, how you downloaded that, and what that generally, like, how is that validated? Like, I'm literally curious.
Yeah. So, there's so many great, amazing peer-reviewed articles from scientists way back in the day that are just so hidden that we don't even see. Right. And it's so unbelievable that this stuff is just right at our fingertips, but we don't see it because we don't look for it. We're so trained to not have that eye to even look for things like that. And so there's so many back in the day that have talked about copper, talked about iron being like the rusty one in the body and how you can attract that by fear. Morley Robbins is a pillar in this community. He talks about this all the time. So I would say that I learned that from him, but where he learned that was from actually studying and looking at older medical journals. And he understood all of these things from going way back to that, or just even at our fingertips now. It's just, we don't ever hear about it. We don't ever see it or hear it. So yes, if we're in a state of fear, we attract iron. It's really interesting. It's just that element that we're attracting.
Yeah, because of the frequencies. Like, it's so interesting. People will be like, how do you know that? And I have a photographic memory, so I have a bioresonance device. So I talk about that all the time. Like, I've got a bioresonance device that does diagnostics. So I don't run labs in my practice. I literally do bioscans. Cool. And I can look at things like all the frequencies of what's out of balance in every single cell. I can do food sensitivity on that. I can do all of that. It's wild. And I see the pattern. I saw it myself. I was super anemic when I was so afraid all the time. Super anemic. Like,
oh, then you're going to love to listen to what I have to say about anemia, because that's my specialty.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. So I'm like, fill me in on all of that. So what was so funny is I went with baby 4. I hit what I know now was postpartum depletion, but it was obviously diagnosed as postpartum depression. And in the system, which I was actively kind of exiting, my doctor was, of the belief system. She told me, she's like, you just need to read the book 1% Happier. You're born this way. You're not changing your brain. Your brain is wired. I mean, I'll never forget her being like, you're wired this way. This is who you are, and I'm like, an anxious, sick person. Like, that sounds terrible. Yeah. And then for me, it was also not what God had to say. I hadn't reconciled the understanding of that I was actually God or made in the image of God. But from a religious nature standpoint, because I grew up like Southern Baptist, I'm like, I at least knew that like God did not say that. So I was like, that's
Thank
a
God you
weird
had that. Thank God you had that knowledge. Can you imagine the people that don't?
I see it all the time. I'm like, whoa, like the non-foundation, and like, yeah, I don't believe in religious nature anymore, like denominations and all that stuff, but I'm 100% like on board with Jesus and like what he, like the entirety of all that, the essence of Jesus is so interesting. Like, but yeah, I struggled, and I finally met my naturopath who I was clinically trained for 2 years. So I went through IHP certification, but first was clinically trained by a renowned naturopath who was curing cancer 100% with bioresonance medicine and emotional work, 100%. And all he would do for his clients is prescribe's not the right word, but I have an allopathic background. So he would ask them to mineral load with the pack that I use to this date. It's a Mother Earth minerals pack. And I found it so interesting. I was like, no one has ever said that to me. Not my OBGYN, not my functional medicine, huge clinic that I paid 30 grand and mortgaged our house in. Nothing. Like no one had mentioned minerals. They might have mentioned some magnesium, might have mentioned some adaptogens, but nothing else. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so he would give them this mineral loading pack and say like, first, I'm going to need you to raise your vibration overall in the whole body enough to do the emotional work. And I was like, holy crap. And he uses German new medicine. So, take me down the rabbit hole of anemia and all of that, please. Cause I'm just so fascinated. I mean, I knew that's what it was. I started doing coffee enemas and reset my liver and mineralize myself. And I healed completely. Like I'm talking no anemia, no struggle. And I was doing the emotional work to deal with anxiety patterns and where those set up. And we can get like deep into that, but basically we can get deep into that after. But I had some provider trauma. I had some trauma in childhood. I had some things that created extreme fear. And that just set a trajectory my whole life.
No, definitely. And that can do it. So here's the thing. Do you want to know pre-GNM or do you want to know GNM?
I want to know all of it.
All of it. Okay.
All of it. No.
Okay. So let's start back. It would probably be easier for me to start back to, the mineral imbalance of what's going on. Okay. And then we'll tie in the GNM perspective because it's a very different one. Yes. So anemia from the standpoint of mineral balancing and RCP and looking at root cause, there's really no such thing as anemia. We're just looking at iron overload. Right.
Yes.
And so iron is just, there's too much of it. And so we have something called the hepcidin. So it's a recycling system. And when there's too much iron, we no longer can rotate and move that iron. Right.
Right.
And I can't remember how many milligrams of iron we're supposed to get a day, but we have that internally in us, except for 1 milligram. And so that 1 milligram can come from our environment. Literally, if you look at the periodic table, you can walk outside and attract iron in that 1 little milligram. And so anything that's fortified with enriched wheat flour, anything that's fortified with anything like that, that has iron in it, attracting fear, right? Fear attracts the iron. Birth control, huge. Prenatal vitamins, I hate them. I despise them. They're huge. They full of iron, right? Even if you're not getting iron, medications, they chalk iron in it, just like dump it in there. It's unbelievable how much iron we have in our environment, and it's stuff that it's like they know. Anyways,
well, it's like they feed, right? They're like, I'm 100%. Like I'm like, this is the right audience to say that. Like they feed the beast, literally.
Oh, they
like,
do.
I'm like, I laugh. I think about that all the time because I came from an OBGYN background and I scrubbed surgery and then got into the marketing. And I'm like, 100% all of this is absolutely terrible advice. We could rabbit hole on how I also believe that you get, like you're saying, I've never heard that from anybody but you, but I know we get minerals from the ether. I know we do. As well, because I know people who are breatharians and are super healthy. I know cultures that have breatharianism, and I'm like, how could you not eat? This is what started me on that train. Other thing is I have a joint custody arrangement. So that has been my greatest teacher. I've been living that for 10 years, not being able to control 10 or 50% of my children's lives. My children have healed from chronic illness without changing their diet 50% of the time, which was my first indicator. Second indicator was I can't control what they eat with dad. So we were
Correct.
super insane in our house about eating clean and doing all the elimination diets and all that. And I talk about it all the time. And I'm not downplaying that. I think there's a time and a place. Like right now, I want to reset my metabolism. I might do Whole30. Like I'm not anti, but I am 100% convinced that a diet change did not heal my child of Crohn's.
Right.
Like 100% convinced.
Correct.
Like I'm like, nope. It was frequencies, it was resonance, emotional, it was all that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And if you pull G&M into it, yeah, it's that as well. But we'll talk about that.
Oh, we can talk about that. But okay, so keep filling us in on anemia. So iron overload. So you guys are hearing that, right? So anyone out there that's been diagnosed should just hear that right there.
Yeah. So what's the number one thing that they tell you to do when you're anemic? What do they tell you to do? Go take iron. OMG. Right. And so giving you iron infusions, giving you iron, they're targeting pregnant women. Like there's no other. I had a really good friend that just had a baby and she was diagnosed anemic, super freaked out. And she said, oh my gosh, in this clinic where we're doing iron infusions, it's all pregnant women. There's something going on. And I'm like, yeah. Yes. So I don't want to know. So really what's going on is we don't have copper. We need bioavailable copper to do checkmate on iron, right? It's like the general marshal. If you don't have that guy in place, you're in a really deep creek, we're up creek without a paddle. So we really have to pay attention to that. And so we're putting more iron into the system. So here we go, more iron. And you're already taking your prenatal, which probably already has iron in it. So you're totally messing up. So what will happen is it spreads into the tissue, right? Because it can't stay in the blood because it says, hey, this is an alarmed rate. Like we have to keep you safe. You're going to die. Like we can't do this. You need to go into the tissue. Guess where it goes into the tissue? Inflammation, pain, all these things that happen. So these women, I can go down this crazy rabbit hole with OB. So even midwives, right? They have this rule where your hemoglobin has to be at I think it's 12 or something. It can't even be at 11 anymore. And if it's not at that level, then they will not accept you. They won't take you. And then if you go to an OB, they're like, oh, you're going to hemorrhage on the table. And they scare these women. They scare them so bad, which is really awful conflict shock for their babies and themselves. Right. And so the problem is that you're creating an environment where there's so much iron that needs to escape that, you probably are going to have that problem. So if they're telling you that you're anemic and you don't take any iron, okay, and you're pregnant, your hemoglobin is low. Well, it drops to compensate. That's what it does. It drops to compensate. And so you give birth to that baby, you probably will hemorrhage because the iron has to escape and it escapes out of the blood, right? Because iron is in the blood. It has to go. To keep you safe and keep you alive. So I have women that I work with and their hemoglobin drops down to 9, 10, which is where it's supposed to be in the last trimester before you have a baby. Yep. And we don't realize that. I have one article that I have that I can point to this and say, see, go show your OB, go show your midwife, right? There's only one peer-reviewed article on this, but it's so well known. It's just that it's not modern medicine. So those women, I have actually physically watched a home birth where I helped this girl get herself in order with getting bioavailable copper, and she was diagnosed anemic. They were so afraid she was going to hemorrhage. I watched that because I'm also a photographer. So I photographed her home birth. And so I'm watching it. That girl, 0 blood, 0. Cleanest birth I've ever seen in my life. The placenta was beautiful. I was like, is anybody seeing this? Is anybody watching this? How many times do I have to preach this and explain that the body knows what to do? It always knows what to do, right?
It does. If you give it the right tools. So wait, to make sure I understand. So you guys gave copper to compensate, right? Did I hear that right? So
you need to have bioavailable copper.
Okay.
Correct. And that's what gets the iron out of the tissue and back into the blood. Oh, I'm not anemic anymore. Oh, what do you know? But you're not going to see that in a pregnant woman because her hemoglobin drops. It drops to compensate for the blood volume. It has to in order to protect the
I'm
baby.
out there talking about how lab work's a scam. That's my
Oh,
thing. That's how I
totally.
go
Yeah.
viral, and that's my like big podcast that I go on.
Yeah.
And I'm usually like, burn your lab work. That's my line. Like, I'm like, people come to me
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, my lab work says, and I'm like, burn it, literally throw it in the fire pit. Like,
Yeah.
it's so fun. I mean, I'll actually back up. A lot of the listeners probably have never even read their own lab work. Okay. But because I am like, this is where I talk about gratitude, right? We're going to get into this mindset stuff with German New Medicine, but I grew up in a very tumultuous childhood with a bipolar schizophrenic mom and an addict dad. So from a very young age, but in like high functioning, like my dad worked in big pharma. My mom was a teacher, like high functioning, but from a very young age, I learned to ask very good questions and developed
Yes,
a
you did.
it was amazing, and developed a
Yeah.
healthy, like, inability to trust.
Yeah.
Which now I would call discernment. Okay. So when people say, how did you forget to move on? I'm like, because there's duality. What they gave me was amazing, and it fostered this entire life
Love
gift.
it.
So I am
good.
happy. When we did the emotional work, I'm like always finding the duality of that. And it wouldn't surprise you that I became a chronically ill person. From a German New Medicine standpoint, I had to reset my body of so much conditioning and then come out of that childlike state and into an adult-like state where I now had like the healthy version of all that, right? So that has been just this layer of unpeeling back. But so I didn't take lab work at face value. Not only that, but I was super interested, and I was like, I'm going to become a pediatric oncologist. Like, I had been studying since I was 12. Like, I was valedictorian. Like, I was super into like getting into allopathy, and then got in it. And I was like, wow, we are like cutting people's organs out, specifically women. Like, this is shocking. Like, got into like OB, and I'm like, whoa, we're like bonusing people for hysterectomies. We're like literally telling women that they cannot reproduce. There's an attack on creation. We could talk about that, but that's brutally obvious. Like, God, that's his agenda.
Obvious.
And there's an onslaught of an attack on that, like from all fronts. And so like, it's abnormal the amount of hysterectomies going down, like crazy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, that's what I see in my practice is either people post-hyst wanting the restorative work with bioresonance, or pre-hyst have a fibroid, PCOS, something like that, even base level minerals before they even have that. But I can see the frequencies that may manifest in a year or two. And it's so funny because I'm like, you know, these organs don't need to leave the body. If you have a fibroid, that is a conflict in the organ. Like, you're struggling with your female, your feminine, or something like that, or there may have been a sexual trauma or something like that. So we're always trying to get into that.
So that one specifically is going to be actually a really special program. So the body says, or the mind tells the body, right? The psyche tells the body, hey, you know, we can't hold on. We need a stronger uterus. We can't hold on.
Yes.
So then it gives it more tissue and more muscle, and it stays there. It's a gift. And so, I mean, I have a very large fibroid, and they have told me many times, you need to have a hysterectomy. And I'm like, get out of here. You know, they're like, when you're done having kids, you know, go ahead and have a hysterectomy. And I point blank looked at this OB, and I was like, why would I do that? And she says, well, you don't need them anymore. You don't need those organs anymore. If you're done having babies, what's the point of having them? Less risk to get cancer. What? Like, are you, this is what you're telling women?
It's wild. It's freaking wild. I mean, it's wild. I had a person that just came to me recently with I call it a misdiagnosis. I mean, I don't diagnose or treat, but I can tell you my opinion. And she came and she had they found a mass in her uterus. So she had a hysterectomy. Then the mass grew in the colon, which wouldn't surprise you because she didn't fix the conflict. So the tissue kept. And what I find so funny, I was doing a science project with my daughter on mitosis, cellular mitosis. She had to make a 5-minute video on that. And she's like, this is so boring. And I was like, this is miraculous. I've never gone this deep into like I've always known that tissues regenerate themselves, but it's so funny because you get to the end of her textbook and it's like, when this gets out of hand, so I literally said hard stop to my daughter. She's 16. She's in high school. I said, So first they start telling you that rapidly generating new cells is healing until it
Yeah.
gets to whatever point that
Yeah, until their point they get uncomfortable with it, right?
someone volunteer and she says, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's weird." I'm like, "That's whack." Like
Yeah.
that's completely
Yeah,
bogus.
like,
But
how does anybody have the authority to tell you that there's a threshold that's been crossed and you can't undo that cross? You gotta have extra special help. Like, it's, like,
right. And
ridiculous.
then I'm like, how pharmakia is this? Like, first the process is good and then the process is bad. Like, I'm so confused. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
the whole
So
body of
ridiculous.
work that me and you do is on conflicts, right? So
Yeah.
the conflict is literally there. But it's so funny. So I mean, I like digress a little bit, but this client, she then developed it in the bowels very quickly. So she was told it was an aggressive cancer. Okay. That's the two words that were said to her over and over, aggressive cancer. And
For
then
the
they did a
colon,
triple bowel resection.
for the uterus or
Okay.
the colon first? Which one, sorry, which one did
It
she have
was
cancer?
when it moved into the
When
colon,
it
which is
moved,
also the
okay.
sales
Yeah.
verbiage, when it
So with
came back
GNM,
or
it doesn't
developed.
move. So
Right.
yeah,
It
there's no
doesn't
movement.
move. So
Yeah.
it moved into the colon. I said to her, it moved from where? Because they took your uterus out in your
Mhm.
ovaries. So
Mhm.
like that one makes absolutely no sense. So I'm like that verbiage alone, we need to knock down that belief system in
Yeah.
that provider prophecy that just happened. Second, I'm like, so it moved where? So then it gets in the colon. For those of you that don't know, a triple bowel resection is they literally take like most of your sigmoid colon, which is the lower colon, and they sew
Mhm.
it back together and connect it to like your near your ileocecal valve. So, and y'all, I'm not a surgeon. So if some of you are on here and you're like, that's not exactly right, I don't care. I'm saying generally what happens. And that the
Right.
point of this is that your bowels are now stressed, like they've lost their motility. They tell you you have to be on a stool softener and XYZ medication your whole life.
Yeah.
So she got on that. And then 3 months later, it moved again to the omentum. Okay. The omentum. And I said to her, I honestly, when I first got on the call, didn't even know what the omentum was. I'll be really honest with y'all. We don't know it all. We have to go learn, right?
Yeah.
As providers. And so it's that, it's that fat that you develop in your organs. So like your core, it's like your protective layer, which you could probably
Mhm.
explain that
Mhm.
better than me. But basically,
Mhm.
I had migrated or moved to there, and really it came there. I literally Googled omentum, one Google search, and the top thing that popped up was like, I just said, like, what is the function of the omentum for the body? And literally AI was like, oh, that's where your toxins go when they're trying to leave the system through like the
For the
lymphatics
lymphatic
and through.
system. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I was like, well, I said to her, I said, this is going to sound probably really hard to hear since you've basically been cut and butchered and it was hard.
Mm. Yeah.
Whatever was moving, whatever was happening, because she wasn't my client yet, this was an initial consult. I said, was working for your benefit. It was showing up in the getting out of the body. Like it was arguably trying to get out through the uterus, probably like with your shedding of your cycles, if I had to guess, trying to get out through the colon with your digestive system and feces and all that, or biofilms or whatever. I said, then it didn't have anywhere else to go. So I was trying to get out the lymphatics. I said, God, the body is so effing miraculous. I mean, I have
Mm.
goosebumps now. I was like on the floor. I was like, the body is so miraculous. It's just so insane. And she never became my client because that was really hard to hear. But my point is that
Yes.
I was like, these doctors are really insane. And
Yeah.
that's actually that happened last year. And that's when I started studying German new medicine because that
Mhm.
one case and scan got me so convicted
Yeah.
about what it was, what was moving, how I was like, man, there's
Yeah.
more to the story here.
Yeah, so there's no movement with that. What it is it's totally different program. So it's a completely different program that
In
she's
every
running.
system, right?
So
Because
a
I
great
just
way to
follow.
debunk totally, yes. And so a great way
Yeah.
to totally debunk this whole metastasis and metastatic cancer is where does it have to travel through? It's going to have to travel through the blood or the lymphatic system, right? Those are the only
Yep.
two ways that I can think that it would go. So just answer me this, why wouldn't it be all over the body? So you're telling me from point A to point B, there's nowhere that it touches until it gets to that?
Yes.
Why would it show up there? It just doesn't make
Yep.
any sense, right? So even that right there, you can
Yep.
totally debunk it and be like, well, I was already questioning that before. So what brought me to German New Medicine was my dad. My dad was diagnosed with cancer as well, and he just passed away last year.
Okay.
Really hard pill to swallow, especially for me, because I'm like,
Yeah.
I was pissed. I was like, how did I miss this? How did I miss this? And this is my dad. He's my best friend. Like, how did I miss this? Right. Um, and I know I came across German New Medicine, something about because they had pancreatic cancer, totally just all over the body. Like they call it stage 4 right away, gave him hardly any time to live, and he really did. He
Wow.
did pass away very quickly. But looking back at the timeline, I watched every single thing that happened with him and when he went downhill. So like piecing the whole thing together from a German New
Yep.
Medicine perspective blew my mind. Well, I found German New Medicine when he was diagnosed, but he was not going to believe that. And so I quickly rushed right over it. But after he had passed away, I really dug into it. And he came to me, really beautifully came to me and said, you're onto something here. You need to keep following this. Like it's more than what you think it is, but you need to follow this. And so I have dug into it really extensively. And it's blown my mind. It pieced all the pieces of the puzzle together for me with what happened to him. And unfortunately, that's really, really bittersweet, right? Because I can't go back and fix a lot of the things that I did do that I wish I wouldn't have done to help him.
Yeah.
But I now know what to do going forward a little bit better than I did before. And that's the best gift that we can do, right? That's the best gift we can give ourselves is just to learn and keep going.
Totally.
Yeah, so totally different programs that this woman was running. But the lymphatic system is a devaluation conflict. So even any tissue layer in the body, she was devaluing her body, which is why it is it's a very common secondary cancer. Lymphatics, bones, tissue, any tissue layer we're going to be talking about devaluation. It's a really common metastasis cancer. It's a
Yeah.
totally different program.
Yeah, I hear my cancer doctor that trained me talk about devaluation conflicts all the time. Like almost all the cancer he sees originates with a devaluation conflict, which is basically what Brianne just said. Like you're not valuing your body, or maybe you don't understand your body. Like something I'm out there trying to teach or you've had a trauma where somebody made you not understand your body. There's so many different things there, right? Like, especially
but what's the point of a devaluation conflict? To keep you alive, right? And so the whole name of the game here is to keep you alive. So we're talking about like abandonment conflicts. We're talking about devaluation conflicts. They're so common. They're almost too hard to get away from. Territorial conflicts are so strong that you almost can't even resolve them. Like they're embedded in you. Once you get them, they're keeping you alive. So when you try to start downgrading and getting rid of some of these conflicts, some stuff may show up, like you're healing. Some stuff is going to show up. So I'm a really big believer in going as slow as the body's wanting to go, right? Like as much as the psyche's willing to reveal, that's the gate. Like that's what's keeping you safe, is that the psyche. So if you try to go past that, it's not going to let you. It's going to say hard stop. Like I'm going to make you have memory loss. I'm going to make you just like totally find another conflict. So we stay conflict active, right? Like it is so important that you understand that the body knows exactly what to do. The reason why we're messing this up is we're trying to intervene. We just need to let the body do what it's supposed to do.
Totally. Okay. So for those of, people who aren't familiar with German New Medicine, when you say active conflict, explain that.
Yeah. So a conflict shock. So you have to be totally caught off guard, isolated. There's all these criteria that you have to meet in order to have a conflict shock. So really what happens is this is kind of when we're younger, we're almost predisposed, or we develop this pattern. So we call it a flavor, right? So like a flavor of a conflict. So for me, it's an indigestible morsel. I always had stomach aches growing up. I still have stomach problems, right? Like if I'm going to have a conflict happen to me, I'm going to take it as an indigestible morsel. Clearly my dad did too. He had pancreatic cancer, right?
Yes.
And so it's a learned behavior.
Well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so now if I step on a track or like something really bothers me, I'm probably going to have a stomach ache. So where you want to find that is like, oh, like, why did that just happen? Okay. So my stomach hurts. So I'm healing, right? So I'm in the healing phase. And so I have to go back to the conflict. What just happened? You have to be like super curious about your body and try to figure out, oh, that's right. My husband talked to me in a weird voice. And I remember last time we got into a fight when that happened and he was doing blah, blah, blah when the original conflict happened, right? And so you have to be totally caught off guard. It's not stress. That's the thing that we always, oh, that person was so stressed out, that's why they got cancer. No, it's a conflict shock. It has to be a
Yes.
conflict. It totally catches you off guard.
Specific.
Like you're driving down the road and you get into a car accident with a red car. That red car is going to be embedded. So now every time you see red, you have a conflict shock with red. It's a track, it's a trigger, right? And so it has to be something that is just so abrupt that catches you off guard. Yeah, it's not stress.
No, I mean, stress is like what the culmination of
good.
a lot of conflict. I teach people all the time, like stress is so funny. It's been looked at so interesting, but stress never ends. Like, okay, people ask me, like, I have more energy now. I have 6 children. I have 2 companies. I have more energy now than I had when I had 2, because I had this belief system in a lot of things. Victimhood, life is hard, didn't know how to renew the mind. I mean, I'm about to back up and then ask you about how you would resolve that stuff and just give us like a crash course. But it's like, people will say, I just need to de-stress. I just need to get out of stress. I'm like, no, you need to renew your mind and figure out how to stay in the radical present and process stress, because stress is not going away. Like that's when I talk to people about raising their resonance, which is the foundation of my practice. It's like, raise your resonance. Why do you keep yourself mineralized? Why do you keep your liver computing amazing? Why do you renew the mind? Okay. Because that's the 3 things I use. I don't practice in supplements and all that stuff. I'm not trained in functional medicine. So I'm like, how do you manage stress? Well, first of all, there are no victims. So you do that. You operate with a spirit of forgiveness. Like you see things in duality. There's lots of ways you can do that. Like, when I get up in the morning, my day is arguably going to have stressors. I call them stressors, acute stressors or chronic stressors, and then positive or negative. If you have a new baby, it's still going to be a life change. It's still going to be a stressor. A good one, albeit, right? If you have a crazy childhood, it was a stressor, but people can't see the duality in stressors because they can't see them as gifts, right? Like your dad dying, stressor, right? Me losing my mom, stressor, like no argument there. But how do we live in the radical present? How do we understand that we move past that and move on into divine health that we are promised? Or how do we continue to walk in divine health? So many people say, well, that means never having a symptom. No, it doesn't. It means you want a symptom. Do you want to stay sick? No, but do you want to process symptoms? I'll tell you, I can move through symptoms so much faster now, embracing them. And I never got that. I always kind of thought it from the yogi standpoint of like, that's woo-woo to just be like, oh, welcome your symptom. Like I never understood that in my mind until I reconciled with like German medicine and then overlaid that with some of my biblical, like I just see the plan so clearly. I'm like, okay, you clearly renew the mind. Like that's what German medicine is. Like you have a new thought process. You don't step in with Pepto-Bismol, right? Like that is pharmakia. Like, like that's what we do, right? Like, I'm going to tell y'all, my daughter was screaming. Like, so over the summer, my teen moved in with her dad. Stressor, okay? Arguably horrible situation. Like, we've had 10 years of tense custody. It was really bad. I didn't also realize, like I knew it, but it hadn't manifested yet. So my 9-year-old took it very hard. And she's like me. She has that indigestible morsel conflict every single time she'll present a stomach ache. It can be anything from something that was said in a dance class to this big stuff. So anyway, we developed a crazy symptom, like insane stomach pain. Like I'm talking, even for me, I was like, I want to go to the ER. Like I was like, I need like relief. Like it's bad. And I was like, okay, it's like gallbladder, stomach. Like we also in our rib cage area, like here could not breathe. Like our ribs would not expand. Like it was like almost like fascia connective tissue, like could not breathe without extreme pain. And she developed it and she was like writhing in the floor. And we were having the same thing for like 12 hours. And like, this wasn't where like I would tell people like, this is my story. First of all, this is not medical advice. You guys do you, right? But this is me.
Exactly.
I like told my husband, I'm like, I am going to dose Motrin just to live through it because I'm not going to ER. I was like, I'm going to dose some Motrin just to get my head together so that I can parent her. But he's like, this is clearly emotional. We were doing all the muscle testing, all the conflict digesting, all that stuff. And obviously we're like, her sister and my daughter just moved out and it was very hard. It was a hit to the system. One of those random off, couldn't plan for it. She just one day was gone and didn't come back. And she has come back now, but just the throes of that even took me like a level deeper, because I'm like, just resolving like, oh, that's what it was. And being able to like understand and embrace, like, that's what it was. And, it was crazy. And I'll tell y'all, without meds and without anything, we resolved. There's some conflicts that are tougher than others. This isn't me giving advice, of course, but it was interesting to work through the process of emotional triage and work through the process of forgiving her real quick, like one day, right? And then work through the process of like, she was in Baltimore on a trip with her grandparents, who I thought were a big role in getting her to move out, and just starting to send her like a text message and offer that forgiveness and free myself from some of that trauma. Literally, like the symptoms like lifted, radically lifted, like they changed. But we see that stuff all the time. We see heavy periods, PCOS. I mean, my gosh, every single symptom, what we want everybody to embrace is that they're your greatest teacher. They're a messenger.
Yeah, they're
not something you go medicate.
Yeah. So the thing that I think is really confusing to most people is, and it's even hard for me to rewire my brain and wrap my brain around this all the time, because what we're taught is, oh, there's the symptom. What just happened? Like in that moment, but that's the resolution. That's when the symptoms come, is when you're in the healing phase, not the conflict phase. And so it's
that is what I had a hard time with.
So hard to wrap your mind around that. It's the gift, right? So I always view it as like, when you're bowling, you have the bumpers, bumpers on the sides that keep you, like the kids, right? I need those. I'm an adult. The bumpers on the sides are the pains, the conflicts, the all the symptoms that we have, right? And they're guiding us to a greater good. So you have to hit off of these guys in order to get down the lane. And so trying to get rid of those, you would end up in the gutter. We need the symptoms. The symptoms are what gets us to our goal. They're always what gets us where we need to be going, right? And so that's the thing that we mess up on the most, is we look at the symptoms as, what did I do wrong? What happened? What's wrong? What's going on? No, it means you resolved it when you have the symptoms, right? So we have the conflict. So we have these phases. And so you have to get through the phases. The first phase is the conflict. How long were you conflict? How intense was the conflict? How abrupt was the situation that you were going through, right? Then you hit a resolution. Once you hit that resolution, you're going to start feeling symptoms. That is the body's way of getting you back to homeostasis. Okay, cool. We're done.
Well, now I'm thinking about this totally differently, because you're right. Up until this point, I didn't start studying German New Medicine. So funny enough, this conflict was 10 years. Like this conflict was
long time,
daily for 10 years. I mean, not daily, but when you have a hostile ex situation, it can be a real onslaught of lots of complicated things. Right. And so, it was really 10 years. And funny enough, my constant pattern during that 10 years was, I can't breathe. Like this is, I can't breathe. And chronic issues. And her pattern was Crohn's pre-markers. And then my 9-year-old developed like stomach issues, which we haven't tested because I don't care anymore. I'm not in functional medicine. But when we went through that, it was so interesting. I didn't realize that, but now that you're saying that, I had handled it so much differently than I would in the past. Like all my friends would say stuff to me like, I can't believe you're just letting this ride. Like, and ironically, the night that we had developed the symptoms, just before that, I had decided, I'm like, my standard before would have been lawyer up and fight and get into tons of chaos and really just go that direction. But through all the learning that I had been doing over the last 2 years, me and my husband had made this decision to be peaceful, just send unconditional love to her and 100% operate in what like the Holy Spirit would operate. Just leave that invite open, not kick her out of our home. Just be like, okay, that invite is open to you. And I'm very protective of this part of my kids' stories, especially because this particular kid has her own social media. So I'm leaving out a lot of the details, but it is really interesting how then the symptom came on so strong. So I'm like, whoa,
you resolved it.
Right. The resolve.
Right. And so then you'll also hit a point, this is my favorite part, my absolute most favorite part of everything in German New Medicine. You hit a point called the epicrisis. It's the epiloid crisis, right? That's the highest point. So that's like that last fever that you have before, you sweat it all out and you're done when you have the flu or something, right? It's the last really intense, like, can we make it through the night? It's that last little push. During that time of the healing where you're feeling the symptoms, you're really abruptly put back into conflict active. And that conflict active space is where your mind is racing and you're thinking and you're trying to resolve the conflict, right? You're up all night long, you're resolving the conflict.
The panic, the
So
anxiety.
during the epi crisis, it puts you back to there. So it's the height of the pain. So probably that really high, sharp pain point that you were at puts you back here. And that's really that space that most people go, I got to go to the doctor. I got to go to the ER. Oh, I got to take the medication. I got to do something because it's the worst it's ever been, right? That is the gift. That's the most beautiful gift because it points you right back to the conflict. So you can remember this was your conflict. Don't do it again. Be serene. Be happy. Don't go back there again. If you don't want this to happen again, here you go. This is what it was. And then after that, you finish out the healing and then you're done. Right. And so that's how it works.
Pain is putting you back in that place. You don't get back to the pain. That is amazing.
It's beautiful.
That in itself is miraculous. Like that's like the body just continues to just blow me away. Like I'm like, that's so miraculous. Like you would never. Yeah, it's miraculous. Like I'm like, if that is putting you back, which this is like 100% true. I can say that's true. At the point of that pain for 12 hours was the point where every image came to my mind from every, situation. And I mean, I just sort of like had this video reel playing. Very similar instance happened with the postpartum fever that I just had, which is when I reached out to you to do my podcast. It was like, my husband was like, why are we rehashing like 20 years of abandonment? Like, I'm so confused. And I was like, I need nurture. Just rub my back. My God. I was like, I'll break this fever if somebody will just care about me. It's so funny. I'm sure a lot of you are like listening and you're like, I'm so
everything
ready.
Is like that every single time. So always
I was
pay
like
attention.
reeling out all the instances. Like I'm like waves. I have a friend who's a provider named Maura who just also brought German New Medicine in her practice. And she's like the one that I call it. It's so funny. Everything is like, it washed over me like waves. Like I was like, wow, I can like feel this because I actively decided to be in it. I didn't get out of it this time. I was like, I'm gonna be in it.
That's huge. That's huge.
Which was, I mean, you can escape it any kind of way. And she actually said something to me. She was like, and some things you guys require, like you're always learning in the journey. Back in the journey when I went to the ER to like in my home, which was very hostile, I couldn't find that peace. So now I'm super grateful for the peaceful nights in the ER, even though there was chaos. I'm saying I am grateful. Like all of that was a teaching and learning experience. And I have a big reel about that if you guys want to watch about how I felt more comfortable in the ER than my own house sometimes. But my interesting thing about that was she had said to me, I said, so if I just like dose some Motrin, I haven't taken Motrin in like 7 years. And I just talked about it twice in this podcast. It was like, if I just like dose some Motrin, what happens like from her point of view? And she's like, oh, you'll still get through the conflict. She's like, it just might process slower. It might shut it down. She was like, you're not going to escape the healing. Like she's like, God wants to give you the healing, like clearly. And I was like, oh, okay. Well then I'll just like, write it out. Like, but isn't that even like an interesting perspective? And so many of us are just, I feel like on a micro level, just doing that so much that we're just escaping with whatever, that it's like,
but I think if you know yourself really well, you have a point where you're like, oh, it's okay. Like this is, I need to go to the ER.
I did.
Like, I need something. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I was like, I'm still going to do the work. I don't idolize the therapy. I just need
that in of itself could be another conflict shock if you don't. So the body's really trying to tell you like, hey, you could really trigger another conflict here. So a lot of times the symptoms, this is, I'm getting ready to do a course. I'm getting ready to do this really big course on health anxiety that's coming up. Right. And so it's going to be like a group community course that you can sign up for. This is so important because we can just get so stuck on these tracks and keep triggering the same conflicts. And so if you're coming from the holistic medicine world where it's like, oh, I better not take Tylenol, I better not take ibuprofen, I better not take any pain relievers, maybe that's what you need to disrupt the pattern. And it's not going to make you not heal. it's not going to make you not heal. And so we've really got to ditch this pattern of the holistic world of trying to tell you good and bad. I spend so much time with my clients getting rid of the good and bad labels, should and
Me
shouldn't, good and
too.
bad. It's like, no, 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 no. There's no such thing, especially when it comes to food. There is no such thing. And yeah, I mean, where do we get minerals from food? We get minerals from
Yeah.
our environment, and they come in the most
Yep.
perfect ratios. Every single mineral ratio is perfect when it comes from Mother Nature. It's like, oh, did God know what he was doing? Yes, of course he did, right? We're tampering with it. We're messing with it by saying, ooh, don't eat any of that orange because there's a lot of sugar in that orange. It's like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Like, what about all the benefits? What about all the benefits from that orange, right?
I know. I have been, gosh, I need to work with you one-on-one because I've been thinking that I did the whole food stress thing to try to lose weight because I put on
Mm.
like, 30 pounds after having back-to-back babies. Funny
Mm-hmm.
enough, like I was really depleted, under mineralized, and just having like a slight thyroid challenge. So obviously we came through that, and now it's
Yeah.
like kind of like that body reset. But gosh, I have a whole different, me and my husband talk about that all the time. Arguably, food can be an agitator,
Yeah.
arguably, but
So food
how
is
do
needing to
so
be
many
seen.
yes, I'm like, how do
I'm
so many
sorry, not food.
people
Weight. So when you put on weight, I need to be seen.
yes, this is like, yeah, this was the last 3 years of my entire marriage. Like, it was so funny because and he knows that. I have publicly said that. Like, me and my husband
Yeah.
are completely fine and we're good because we're
Mm-hmm.
both interested in that kind of deep work. But yes, it was like we went through some tense years and it was like
Yeah.
I just felt like nothing. And then I was wrestling this with my ex, and there's a lot in my life that was like that. So, oh, yeah, put
Yeah.
on some emotional weight for sure. And people will say,
Yeah.
oh, and I am telling you, I became the crowd of like, no diet would move that, no amount of activity. Like I was in that crowd fully witnessing it.
Yeah.
It really did some convicting. Like, and
Yeah.
I say this all the time. My daughter, we were told that she should do an elimination diet,
Mm.
hardcore, like
Mm.
she could eat barely nothing.
I get
And
a
in
lot
a
of those kids.
joint custody household where your children are back and forth every 2 days and have
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
long weekends, it was impossible, especially one where you cannot work with the other person to even
Oh
get in the
yeah.
belief system
Oh
of that.
yeah.
And
That's
so
tough.
I spent a couple months in like extreme stress and then realized like, I'm like, I can shift her emotionally. Like, so we ended up
Yeah.
like, I'm like, okay, she needs nurture. She needs these things. She needs permission. I need to forgive her dad. Like we need to
Yeah.
reduce some
Good for
chaos
you.
in her environment. It was
Yeah.
huge. And I tell
Yeah.
people all the time, I shifted her with zero of the pills and protocols from functional medicine because dad didn't want to do
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
And that was a gift. You talk about gifts. I'm like,
Yes.
some people stay in that
Absolutely.
anger, right? Then they just further.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like,
See
they're
the
like,
good in it.
yes, they're like, did it, this,
Mm-hmm.
me too. I am unwrapping the good, bad dynamic in my
Yeah.
practice every day, straight
Yeah.
away. Like, I'm like, you guys cannot operate in that. Like, it's such a hard religious nature to operate in. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
do get
Mm-hmm.
it for sure, but like, it is so crazy. It leaves no
Yeah.
room for the love vibration whatsoever. Like, you
Well, it's
cannot
just
bring
been
it in
it's been tampered with, right? And so like we
so
all
much.
internally have this good and bad like meter.
Yes.
I wouldn't even want to call it like good and bad, but like gas or brake, it's like we have that internally with everything.
Yes.
What makes it really messed up is when we look externally for that. And when we look externally for any of that is where we get into trouble. It always has to
So
come
true.
from within. You know what to eat, what not to eat. You know when to stop and when not to stop. We do it
Yeah.
naturally. We look at the plate of food in front of us and we're like, oh, wow, the potato sounds really good today. Like yesterday,
Yeah.
probably you went for the chicken first. You didn't go for we do it all the time. And so you have to see the good quote. I'm doing air quotes, everybody, good in that, right? Like
Yes.
we can't but it comes from internal. So for you to have that shift is what puts you in more serene space and peace. And that's what helps you not be so conflict active, right? So you have this
Totally.
conflict shock and this whole horrible thing that's happening within the family. How are you going to stay level with that so it doesn't go take you under in the quicksand? That's how
Mm-hmm.
you find the
Mm-hmm.
good in it. You find the good.
Yes. So is that what you're primarily? I want to know how you got so interested in minerals, because for me, this is me. I've been fleshing this out. It's a theory. It's data backed based on my clients. So you guys, there won't be a peer reviewed study yet, but I know I'm right because Holy Spirit's so good to me like
Yeah.
that. But it's like you can't have one without the other. We kind of touched on emotional work. Obviously, with German New Medicine, you're processing through emotions. One of the things I
Right.
figured is that obviously there's times and places for when you're safe enough to do that work. Like that was one of the things that I figured out. Like I was like early on from a little kid, I knew I was intuitive. Like I knew I could download from the Holy Spirit. I knew I could discern all that stuff. It wasn't safe in my home to operate in that a person.
Mm-hmm.
So had I done that with my mom, that would have been crazy. Like she went, in fact, when I did that, she became violent and obviously that enraged her demons. So
Yeah.
funny enough, there was a nice protective measure built in there. When I stepped into my own adult mind and, left my father and mother's spiritual house, which I believe happens, then started operating in that. But what I realized is that it's almost like we need to bring our vibration up in order to be able to do that. Right. And there's several ways we
Mm-hmm.
can do that. Like that's one of the reasons why I made the foundation in my practice minerals. And I want to know what you saw or what got you really interested in that, because there's always this sort of fine line of like to supplement, not to supplement, da 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 da.
Yeah.
Like good, bad. What do you take? What do you don't take? Everybody out there is really gaslit in that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
How much do I take? Mm-hmm.
in where I talk about supplementing in the flow state. So obviously, I mean,
Yeah.
I literally intuitive now can feel it in my body, but I also teach my clients sort of muscle tests. But I like line what I think you need to boost your body, which is like my top 6 minerals: iodine, copper, mag, potassium, sometimes selenium. But I live in the Midwest. Again, if somebody had a diet rich in like seafood and stuff, I don't think I would be doing that. But my
Yeah.
point is, I believe in supplementing like you compensate for what your lifestyle isn't. I tell my clients that all the time. So right now, I'm traveling, I'm running at a high capacity, I'm doing that. And so I know that I need to compensate. Like I'm not doing it from a place of I'm broken, I'm stressed out, blah, blah, blah. I'm doing
Yeah.
it from a place of like, my diet 2 nights a week is Chick-fil-A. So I understand like it needs to change, and in the flow state after baby, my supplement regimen changed. My minerals changed. I've added more, taken less. I've added some fulvic and humic. I've added more trace, like, just to rebuild postpartum. So I got into minerals as a foundation just because I think they raise the body's vibration and you're able to
Yeah, they
emotionally
absolutely
complete the
do.
work at a better rate. I'm curious what got
Yeah.
you bridging the gap with minerals.
Yeah. This is going to be really funny and not so cool. um, I think I had a really, really intense childhood of being sick all the time, right? Like, so having some really chronic symptoms where I was like in and out of the doctor's office, they couldn't find anything wrong with me. And I think that there was one point my dad was like super frustrated with me and he kind of like cornered me because I wouldn't swallow a pill. And he was like, you need to do this because you're a pain
Wow.
in the ass, right? Like you're
Yeah.
sick all the time. And like, I'm
Normal
not going to keep
parenting.
taking you to the doctor. Like do this, like, this is what you need to do. Right. I remember I choked on it. And I developed like this fear of like taking pills I still don't swallow pills. I really don't swallow pills.
I don't swallow
And
pills
so
either.
when I got older, I was like, oh my gosh, Ayurvedic medicine, like they don't swallow pills, right? Like they put everything on their tongue because they know that their body and their brain have to register what tastes that they're taking in order
Yep.
for them to digest it. And I was like, I'm not wrong. Like, I'm right. I was like, I have permission. And then they came out with all these like gummies, vitamins and stuff. And I was like, yes, I'm not the only one, But what really got me to minerals too was like the acceptance of like, oh, I don't have to take these pills. Like I don't have to take them. But then when I understood like what the minerals were, really the foundation of our health, like the foundation of everything, and they run all of it. They run the vitamins, they run the enzymes that turn into hormones, they run everything. That blew me away. And I was like, oh, I don't have to get it from pill form. Nice. Like it just it was a gift, right? That was the total gift of what my dad did. Conflict shock. okay, cool. But it was the bumpers that kept me down the line of what I needed to know. So it has fostered me into being the person that I am, right? So I found the good in that. But just minerals really, they shift. Okay, so here's the thing. When I learned German new medicine. So here I am doing all these HTMA testing, so hair mineral analysis tests, and balancing out minerals and saying, okay, like, oh, I know synergistically, like this mineral works with this one. We got to start with this one. Let's do this one and then go to that one. And then I started seeing clients that were not like, they felt better, but their minerals were in the same pattern. Like we do another HTMA follow-up in like a year and it didn't change at all. And I'm like, okay, there's more to this. And so some people would be like, oh, whatever, that's a fluke. I know what I know. I'm good. I was like, no, I'm eager. I want more. Right. Yeah. And so I learned German new medicine. And here's the cool part. So as soon as I brought that in, and we're doing a lot of awareness work, and we are resolving conflicts actively as the body's willing to release them and let them go, those minerals shift without taking anything.
Yes.
Nothing.
Yes.
Not a single thing. I'm like, oh, I did it. I can figure it out. Like I totally, it sat so well with me in my soul that I was like, oh my gosh, it's not the supplements. It's not anything. And arguably it's not even the food, right? It's like not even the food. No. Like it will shift where it needs to shift. The minerals move where they need to move, but we get minerals from our diet and from our food, right? And from the environment. And so intuitively, I got to step outside. Like it's so weird. Yep. I need to go to the ocean. I got to see the sun. I got to go for a walk, or I want that orange on that tree. Like we do it intuitively. It is so mind blowing to me.
Yes.
How much I saw the analytical data of that shifting without doing a dang thing. I mean, it was just like, what?
I had the same experience. And obviously, as a person who's out there, selling a program, like, let me bioresonance you. I've switched how, at first I thought, God, we just scrap it all, right? And teach the mind work. But this is what I've realized. And that me and you are seeing the same thing. I have now evaluated 200 plus case studies in this. True story. I'll do a bioscan. This is true story. And I will see what I see, right? And I always do it. So for those of you, there's several bioresonance devices out there. I'll just touch on it really quickly. Like a Healy, AO scan. I know some of you have heard of these things and some providers are using them. Those are all one way. Yes, you can look at them and see what's going on, but usually you're just sending yourself outbound frequencies, which is good. But the one that I have can actually look at what is out of balance in the body and look at every cell and then send the meta-therapy, the correctional therapy. Well, I used to do a scan, but then I started doing a scan with 5 rounds of corrections. So a scan with 5 rounds back. Things would shift and not show us problems anymore with the corrections. Now, that was the first indicator. I was like, okay, this person didn't put anything different in their body. I sent the frequencies of, everything that's downloaded in the device. So everything from rocks, plants, minerals, all the homeopathy, that stuff's all pre-programmed. So I was like, okay, it's just push button, sending it out. And I'm like, so I'm sending them God vibration, for lack of a better word, because you don't have to select what it is with my device, and they're shifting. So first of all, it's lab work's complete freaking bullshit, because if that were the case, I might print a report for this person. So I don't do reports in my practice. I might print a report for this person and they're going to say, oh my God, I'm this, which is what I saw when I saw my lab work. But I saw the most interesting thing. And my functional medicine doctor said, this is interesting. No knowledge of minerals whatsoever. She said, you have enough iron in the body, but you're not absorbing iron. Remember, we went back to the anemia thing, and y'all go back and listen, because she broke that down. So, I mean, that's already been talked about, but it's so funny. And I went down the biggest rabbit hole in that. I'm like, why is my liver not processing iron? What is the deal? So that was all the anger, all the rage. My naturopath is you got to forgive your mom. It was a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
So that happened. Then I got into how we come into those conflicts during the birth portal and everything else, which is those conflicts surface for women when you're pregnant, having babies, even when people move off to college. So I saw that. Now we've seen on the data tons. I can do a phone call with someone and make them aware of their conflict, initial scan. And obviously a lot of times how I would say to do metatherapy and minerals. So one things that I do in my practice is like, all right, let's start minerals. And I'm going to run the therapy to open your pathway faster. You have to step into it. Like the device isn't going to heal you. I will be out there saying that and I will die on that hill. It will not.
Mhm.
Like, and it's hard to be a person who's wanting to sell a 6-week program that includes metatherapy and say that's true. You are a
Yeah.
bioresonance device.
Right.
You are.
Right.
Like, I mean, I could send you an intention that I want you on my podcast. You might not know who I am, but if I sent that intention enough times, we would find each other if we were supposed to. Like, we are bioresonance devices. So it's so interesting. We put out resonances. We're like antennas. We receive, we give, we vibrate. Like, we're like a big bag of light water vibrations. And so anyway, I will do a phone call with someone. I have the text, I have data. They'll often text me and say, did you scan me because I'm not constipated anymore? Did you do this because I'm not constipated anymore? I'm like, nope, just brought the awareness straight top of your mind. Like, and your body was like ready for the release. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like
that's
for whatever
interesting.
reason, you made the phone call, you booked the appointment, you're finally ready. That had nothing to do with me. And then I sort of validate, which I'm sure is you see that too. It's like I sort of validate like what you were thinking, feeling, and then you're suddenly like, all right, I can let it go. It doesn't always happen. I see people who don't shift. Flip side of that is they're usually in deeper belief systems or don't know any of this stuff or completely gaslit by pharmakia or in doubt or double-minded. And they're not getting their results quick because they're looking for that one thing that stuck, that one trauma, that one thing. And I'm often like, it's like, it is one thing, but let's find that. And then let's understand that your symptoms, like I have somebody right now with adult asthma, acute breathing problems. And we have decided the way to move through that is to release childhood, to burn all this stuff that he's keeping that creates emotional conflict alive from childhood. And isn't that so interesting? Like, that's like, to me, became so interesting. I was out there like, none of this lab work is showing correctly because we're changing every millisecond. Like, we're processing like computers, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, people shift without the therapies. They shift without the therapies, you know? And I've seen it with my own kids, y'all. My kids are not good at taking things. They don't. Like, we don't supplement anymore. We only do liquid tincture minerals because I follow Ayurvedic, like sort of approach. And we take homeopathy or minerals suspended in nano water, and that's how ours are delivered. And or I just deliver them with my device. But anyway, I digress. But they are fine. Like, they're mineralized. They're not mineral deficient on my device. I run their DNA once a week. So I'm like, isn't that so funny that
so their minerals will shift though. Like, they always shift to compensate for whatever we're going through.
It's amazing.
That's the thing that's changed my practice. Before it was like, I can move these. No, I can't. I don't have the power to move them. I can tell you to like macro dose selenium or magnesium or sodium, potassium, take all the freaking adrenal cocktails you want to, and they will not move. They don't move. And and that's feel
because
good.
Someone's not ready, right? They're not dealing with the conflict. Is that right?
Yeah. So they're in conflict active. They're not in the healing phase, right? Or they are in a healing phase and their minerals need to be where they're at. Like, we're tampering with things that don't need to be moved. And so looking at the HTMA is a great picture, and it paints a picture for me, but it's not going to be something that I'm like, oh yeah, just go to take this. You can get in a lot of trouble with people that do mineral balancing and they're like, oh, just take this. Oh, just do that. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It does. It has to be just a piece.
No, this is how I see it. And I mean, I'd love to hear your take. You're exactly right. So being in allopathy, I wanted to reconcile what side effects were. Like, I was like, why do we get side effects from medicine? I mean, clearly it's unnatural intervention. I get that. But I started figuring out, I'm like, we wouldn't have effects that were negative if we were doing the right thing. Like, and it's also a reframing. Like, if you're having a healing conflict, that's fine. So it's trying to leave the body. I get that. But I was trying to reconcile like the effect thing. And then when it comes to the minerals, I have never understood, just from a logic reason standpoint. Like, I saw functional med doing that. And I'm like, how do you would have to test so much and triage so much to be accurate there. Like I know that from just doing 3 bioscans a week on one person for 6 weeks. They never look the same. Never.
Yeah.
I'm not looking for them to look the same, but I'm saying that's just because we're doing whole body frequency balancing. Like you're receiving frequencies that boost energy. That's it. So I'm like, and what you're saying is all your systems, you see them, they're compensating up and down, right, wrong. They're doing that. Like I'm not, I get some providers all the time that want to put the device that I sell into their person. They go, how do I run the labs? I'm like, fuck the labs. Like you don't even need the labs. Like if you want to look at their minerals.
Yeah.
And then see them literally you need to come up with a way to shepherd them through resolving their chronic beliefs, like, or you're not going to move results, or you're going to be doing pharmakia. You're going to be creating people who stay sick, and that's your intention.
The thing is the people that are going to the doctor for a symptom means that they're already healing. So
right.
The problem is we're just disrupting the entire process. That's what the problem is.
That's so wild.
Minerals to me are, I call them like sitting ducks. They just, you want to have an abundance of them to help you get through the conflicts, right?
Yeah.
So you need them there as a cushion for when you go through life. Stressors, I'm air quoting. You need them.
Yeah.
You need them. If you don't have them, my theory, which I can't prove this, but I can with my clients, is that they get stuck right when they get to a certain point in that process. They get stuck and they have to keep looping. So it's almost like a hanging healing. They're going to continue to keep looping. They loop over and over and over again because they don't have enough minerals in place to get through point A to point B. Right. So there is such thing as having low minerals where you don't have anything. Like I see fast fours, like a fast 4 on a hair mineral analysis test is literally the last end of the rope. Like you can't go any further than that. Your minerals are so shot, they're gone. So you talk about spinning minerals, having babies back to back to back to back, right? That is so stressful. I think I think Morley Robbins talks about this. It's equivalent to like climbing Mount Everest. It is seriously so stressful on the body, but it's a good stressor, but it does take minerals. You're giving that baby life. Why do you think we don't get pregnant? Why do you think infertility is a big thing? I mean, that's my specialty is infertility. There's so many different reasons why you can't get pregnant, but one of the biggest is that right there. Like you don't have enough minerals in place. If you don't have that, your body's like, I'm sorry, we can't even keep you alive. How are we going to keep another one alive? We're going to kill you. You will die because we're giving everything to the baby.
Yep.
The body says
no.
I
always say we vibrate before we think. I experienced that firsthand myself. I have no problem getting pregnant. I have very healthy pregnancies, then had 2 miscarriages back to back. And I had a very significant heart conflict challenge going on. Very significant. Led me into open heart surgery. That was my choice at the time. Yeah, I had open heart surgery in 2016, but the way that I was in that, I was very into allopathy. That was like the height of my career of like figuring that out. Didn't know what I know now. But the craziest part is that this is what really launched, if I go way back to my whole belief system in this, I just didn't work in it yet, but I had already been living pretty clean. Like I was eating clean, not doing toxic product. Like I had reduced the drawdown on my body significantly because I believed in all that. So all that's good. Yeah. This is something this is good. What the holistic influencers are all about. It's like, yeah, reduce drawdown, fine, but don't be all chaotic in it. Like if you can't afford an air doctor, you're not dying. Like I despise air doctors. Air doctors can be like, yeah, we hate you too. Cause I'm like out there constantly railing them on social media. It's fine. Not
they're
as a company.
They're going to ask you to be an influencer next.
They'll be like, please. Y'all, I'm into air purification, like not as a company. Yeah. It's fine. I don't own one, just so y'all know. I don't own air cleansing systems in my house. I go outside quite a lot. We do the windows open kind of thing, and we're into that. But anyway, I'm like, it's so funny because I had already been doing the clean living thing, was already into sunshine. Like we were farming, we ate really decent, like all that stuff. The convicting thing was after choosing open heart surgery out of extreme fear, which you guys, I have a solo podcast on that. You can hear about that. I when I woke up, they had said you'd be in the hospital 4 to 6 weeks. I was out in 12 days, like
Mm,
completely out. And I didn't know this from a German New Medicine standpoint, but I was already doing the reconciling with my mom stuff when that happened. So people always say, would you go back and do it again and do it that way? You know, I don't know. I don't want to change my journey. I don't have regrets. It's not like that because that launched a lot of learning. But
yeah,
with the
exactly.
tools I have now, no, I wouldn't have gotten rushed into open heart surgery. I mean, that's just the thing.
Right.
And
Right.
because I wouldn't have thought the hole in my heart was a problem. But I said that about the miscarriages because my body did not have enough at all to create that life. I know that 100%. And then what I also know, what's interesting, and I've read thousands of women's accounts on this. I can't wait to have somebody on my podcast that has a very similar account. I don't claim to have all the spiritual side of this figured out, but me and my husband have planned our 2 kids. And then 8 years later, which is when I've just had these back-to-back 2 surprise babies, after being mineralized, after being healthy, after improving the conflicts, all the conflicts, like sorting
Hmm.
those out, not only emotionally with my husband and our stuff, but also like my own stuff. We had 2 babies. Like we had the 2
Nice.
babies that were
Yeah.
miscarried. Like maybe not those
Oh,
2. That's the part that I'm not out here saying I'm not sure, but the
yeah.
babies that were planned and given to us, once we got healthier and started practicing in the renewing the mind and these belief systems, we got them. We had 2 surprise babies that were pretty out of character. Like, I mean, not out of character, but like not planned, kind of
Yeah.
tail end of my cycle. Like, I mean, I have an aura ring, like I have a really regular cycle, like,
Mm,
but I'm like convicted. I mean, the vibe in my body is high now. It's arguably higher, way higher than it was.
yeah.
Like, it's like, you know, my mind's in a different space. I would love to hear at some point about like your approach to infertility. I'm sure it's just German New Medicine, but that's so wild. So your specialties, because I want to be able to send people to you.
Yeah.
Infertility. You love working with
Well,
women.
let's
Tell us
see.
what you love to work with.
Yeah. So I think my specialty is women's health and
Yeah,
infertility, pregnancy, postpartum. I mean, I started out that way and I still have a heart for it. I
me
help
too.
everybody though. I work with men, I work with
Yeah,
children, I work with moms through the children or women like wives through the men because a lot of men don't come on these calls.
right. I always get the husbands through the
Yeah.
wives. It's so funny. I'm like, I
Yeah,
get the
yeah.
whole family through the wife. And the mom's like, we're all strung out. And the husband's like, we're
Right.
fine.
Right. After my dad passed away, I've been taking on some really chronic cases, like
Mm,
really intense, like cancer and
cool.
like last ditch effort cases. And
Wow.
it's triggering for me to
Yeah.
take those on. And so I have to have really a really good, I don't want to call them boundaries, just have to have really good awareness within myself in order to take those on. But I do love doing them. But infertility is just I struggled with infertility myself. And so I wish that I had had a coach. Shit, I would have like taken any coach at that point, like there's no support in that area, or there wasn't at that time. Now there is, which is great. But yeah, it's like I would say the biological male and female is a really big part. German New Medicine is a big one, and then mineral balancing, iron, anemia. Oh my gosh, if I literally could do that in my sleep.
Yeah.
Dealing with biological differences and relationships between male and female, raising our children, the family dynamic and household. That's a really big one. An awareness piece, becoming very aware.
Do you mean people operating like too much in the masculine, too much in the
Cor
feminine, that kind of thing,
Yeah,
like role
correct. Yeah,
reverse?
and
Oh,
and
interesting. We have
honestly,
like
the
the same
agenda
passion.
yeah, and the agenda of what's fostering into the children now
Yes,
is it's really unfortunate is what it is. And
it
without
is.
getting too deep into it, it's really creating a lot of conflicts in our children. Whether you're okay with the agenda or not, it's the way that it's being talked about and the age gap that it's being talked about, I think, is really inappropriate. And so, yeah, so the biological differences between male and female, and the spirituality of what God really wants for us, and so bringing that into the dynamic as well. I do feel like most of our conflicts come down to gender roles, masculine men, female and male. And if you look at German New
That's true.
Medicine, if you're spending a lot of time as a female in the masculine role, you're going to have a lot of conflicts. And so there's a lot of that I see.
I did not know that that was in German New Medicine. So that is
Yeah.
I'm like, man. So I
It's
will
a
tell you
little
the catalyst.
segue. It's a little off path the road. And so it's kind of uncharted. It goes deep.
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, make the path. I had something
Yeah.
so funny. I can see that disturbance on my scan. So what's interesting, we're not talking about the
Mm,
extreme version of transgender out there that's being marketed. I'm saying I can
right.
see in the hypothalamus of the brain this
Mm-hmm.
one frequency that is a gender confusion or
Yeah.
a gender distortion. I'm sorry, they call it a
Yeah.
distortion. So if I had my scan, I could pull it up. It's called adipose genital dystrophy, and it's or adipose gender
Mm,
dystrophy, and I see it on my scans. And
wow.
I have been checking women for it.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
haven't yet been able to check or had many males besides a couple husbands because I've been working with women. But for 2 years, I started seeing a lot of women with female issues like
Mm-hmm.
PCOS, hormone
Mm-hmm.
issues. Here, I can take both. And then nurse my baby while we're on the podcast. Sorry, you
Oh,
guys.
yeah. No worries.
I mean, I'm not sorry for nursing. I'm sorry because he's like freaking out.
Yeah, that's okay. Mama life.
Okay, so
Aw.
anyway, new babies. That's so wild that you say that about German New Medicine because I had started to see that on scans. And so
Yeah.
I was diving into that a little bit with women, but don't have the German New Medicine tools. But what I do know is that my conflicts got insane when I was operating in the masculine. Me and my husband had a very tense season where he lost his job during COVID and kind of had to form an entire new identity, which I understood. And then I was breadwinning, working in sales. And there was a point where he was like, you make more in one sale than I make in a week. So why don't we just like try that? And
Yeah. Makes
wow,
sense.
how derailed our home got was
Yes.
fucking insane. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you guys. Our kid, and it was never like we weren't willing to do something else. It wasn't like no one wanted to work. It wasn't like that. But it was like, and he needed a legitimate break. But I will say to this day, I was not prepared for how it is to breadwin, provide, operate like a male. He was not prepared for how it is to operate like
You're not
a
supposed
female.
to.
Like it was enjoyable for a minute, like not gonna lie, like it seemed okay. But we got into it about 8 months in, and we have never been more chaotic, stressed, weird stuff like wanting to gamble. Like I'm saying, like weird stuff that we had never ever encountered, like in our marriage, like came up. It was so wild. And then it's so funny. I've known about the masculine feminine, and my naturopath, when I was in the height of my postpartum, that was right after I had baby number 4, and I was in extreme postpartum depression depletion. He said, that's actually why I grew my hair out. He said, you got to stop functioning like a man, he said, and your husband has got to stop functioning like a female. And I was like, all right, we could give that a try. Like that's very foreign for me because that was like our dynamic. And I will tell you the amount of resolution just from changing our roles, which also took 3 years. I will not claim on this podcast to y'all that it was easy. It was a complete homeostasis reset full of symptoms.
Yeah.
But I would be interested to see what types of things you see symptom-wise come up. I mean, I see clear-cut female issues, the PCOS,
absolutely.
all of it.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Just straight conflicts. Well, it depends on the way the psyche decides to perceive it. But yeah, if you're living on the opposite side, right? And so looking at German New Medicine, you're going to have the conflicts for male and female on different hemispheres of the brain. And so if you're focused too much on one side of the hemisphere of the brain, you're going to tamper with your hormones. It messes with the hormones. Yeah. And so then we're going to have different conflicts. We're going to have more conflicts coming up. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I feel like it all kind of goes back to that is the way that we're looking at. And if you look at our generation, it kind of was maybe the last of the male and female gender role, kind of like, okay, dad goes to work, mom stays home and watches the kids.
Yep.
That slowly started to kind of stop. And so it started to flip. We have boss babes now. We have moms that want to do it all. And of course, where are the minerals going to come from? It's like, and then you throw on prenatal vitamins on top of that, which really, really, really messes with minerals. I
And
mean,
birth
it
control
really
and
messes
vasectomies. I'm like, my God,
correct.
we could talk
And
about
then it's
that.
like, oh, we don't want babies anymore. And why are men having no testosterone anymore? Or why are the sperm count low? It's just, it's a big rabbit hole, but it's a big one that needs to be talked about.
Man, absolutely. We could do a whole second episode on just this. I had no idea
Yeah.
that was some of your work, because I'm
Yeah.
like, that has been my interest that has been piqued for
Mm.
literally the last couple of clients that I've had. It's so funny. You get through some method of looking deep at things, and then something just surfaces. And I started to notice, I'm like, man, in every single one of my female clients, I'm coming up with this gender confusion frequency, this gender confusion thing. I'm like, where is that coming from? And obviously, I mean, I'm always curious. I'm like, how does that set up? Like, I have my belief systems around like probably sexual trauma, stuff in the home.
Yeah.
Like, I get that, but I'm like, it's just so wild. I've been pointing that out to some of my female clients. Like, some of it's brutally obvious. Like, I understand the boss babe culture. I also understand leaning more toward the masculine, because if you study like biblical cosmology and all that, like, I'm a life path 11. I'm a Leo. Like, I'm comfortable in masculine energy, like, can totally step in it, but I'm not a man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, there's a way to bring that role in the feminine that I've had to learn. And so much of that was operating out of trauma programming, that it was like, wow. And the amount of female issues, Lord, almost every client I've had with a hysterectomy has shown that frequency.
Oh, absolutely. I don't doubt that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't doubt that at all. So yeah.
Pretty wild. Like, I'm like, it's like, it's some of my latest body of work, which I'm like you. I'm like, I have no studies. I have my data.
Yeah.
I'm looking at it. I mean, I can see it across the world, but when it comes to convincing, people, it's like, I think people just have to resonate with that information, but it's brutally obvious. I mean, right now. The mineral part of it's wild to me that you brought to the table.
Yeah, but like, we're boots to the ground doing the work, right? I mean, everybody else is just sitting behind the computer. The big man's telling them what to do. Take this medication, do this pharmaceutical, whatever, do this surgery. This is the deep work. This is the real work, where you're actually looking at the body and you're stripping all of that away. I mean, when I screen for my clients, some of them I turn away. Like, I do free consults. I offer free consults because I have to get to know these clients. Are you willing to go deep? Are you willing to let this stuff go? If they're not willing to go this route, and they're not even remotely near being able to believe in this, it's not going to work. I'm just going to annoy them. I'm going to upset them. The work that I do is really harsh. I get very harsh. The psyche does not like things to be just like, you got to cut deep. You gotta cut deep.
Got to go straight for the cutthroat with the psyche.
Yeah.
You can't be, what is it, peacemaking, like, with the psyche. I tell my best friend that all the time. Like, she's so funny. She's like, you're the person I call when I really want to, like, just have an answer. And I'm like, yeah, there is no like this way or that way. Like, we need to like just get it that way and move on.
Right. Yeah.
Gosh. Oh my gosh, Brian, that's so fascinating. That is like, now I'm like really into it. And I mean, that is so wild. I want people to understand that the overarching idea here, and what we've been talking about with depletion, is like, when you're not embracing who you are as a person and a body and who God made you to be, you're susceptible to not functioning well. Like, right? Like, that's the biological. I recently had somebody, it was a really interesting question. Somebody asked me what I think about, it was like a question, like, what would you say to your daughter if she came and told you like that she was a lesbian or something like that? And I'm not opening up a huge combo about this. I'm just saying my answer to her was like, well, the first thing I would say was, it's not biological to not want to create. So it is a conflict. Like, we can't argue that. Like, I'm like, I don't even need to talk about it in like,
where did that come from? Yeah. Where did that come from?
Any of that stuff. Like, I'm like, that's what I would tell her. I would be like, nature, logical. Like, nature has order. Like, order was how the world was formed by God. So nature has a plan. Like, I'm like, and that is clearly in violation of the plan. I've been telling the women similar to that. Like, obviously some of them I pre-screen too. I can tell them, I'm like, well, we're called to renew the mind in the Bible. Like that's the simple thing. We're called to renew the mind. So if we're never looking at the mind and we're always outside of
Yeah.
ourselves, looking at a medicine, a something, a device, an influencer, I mean,
Mhm.
I'll never stop talking about that because that is the truth. If we can't do that,
Yeah.
what they're dishing out isn't going to work for you. I see it all the time. They're like, XYZ told me this healed their kid. I tried it,
Yep.
didn't heal my kid. I'm
Do
like,
this diet, do this. Yeah.
right? I'm
Right.
like, I see every influencer like, this is the protocol for
Ugh,
pots, for
the
pans,
TR,
for
what is
whatever.
it? TRS, man,
Oh,
my son was
yes.
dealing with like some autistic behaviors, and we can talk about that in a whole nother podcast.
Oh, that's cool. I would
And
love
I
to hear about
didn't, yeah, and I didn't go anywhere near the route that I would have gone, right?
that.
And
Mhm.
so it's like, oh, take this TRS stuff and it'll change everything. And I'm so sorry for the people that do this and believe in it. Because if you believe in it, maybe it does work. Because it's like placebo effect, right? You believe in it, it works.
Yeah, it's like you are the placebo. The problem
Yeah,
is that it resurges. This is what I see. I see you do
correct.
a protocol and then your symptom rages harder. Like that's what
Yeah.
I've seen
Yeah.
in
Well,
practice.
I mean, it's like it's the way that again, the symptoms come on when you've resolved it. And so the really cool part, if like you really want to get into it, is like we get into constellations within GNM. And constellations within GNM are all of the psychological things: schizophrenia, postpartum depression,
Okay.
chronic anxiety, autism,
Yeah.
ADHD, all of those things. They're all within German New Medicine as well. And Dr. Helmer talked about this. This was the last step that he took before he passed away, was looking at constellations. So all the mental stuff in the body and how it works from a German New Medicine perspective.
I need
It's
to understand that because I think I'm
totally
like a
different.
bit double-minded. Like I think I'm like
Yeah.
feeling a bit double-minded. Like I'm not double-minded like I don't believe in it. I'm double-minded in the fact of like I can feel myself not knowing enough about it, which I love, is
Yeah.
that so I'm like, okay, I see symptoms rage on with people, right? When they don't
Mm-hmm.
address stuff, like
Mm-hmm.
arguably. But I also what I have seen is that by the time someone comes to me, I'm not the person someone comes to when they're ready to start and they just have no idea. Typically, they
Yeah.
won't resonate with what I'm saying. They will, they will come to me when they've tried it all, done it all. They do coffee
Yeah.
enemas every day and then it's not working.
Right.
And their symptom, I'm usually getting them to step into the belief system. Like I'm trying to get one of my clients right now who has the asthma and his breathing has gotten worse since we started, that he's like there.
Yeah.
He's there. He
You're already
knows what to
there.
do.
You're already doing it.
He
Yeah.
messaged me and, said, he's like, I keep asking myself what to do. And I'm like, live it. Like, I basically
Yeah.
so what's so funny is his body. Yes, I will go through my questions on my session and I'm not going to share more because I just don't want to about this particular person, but
Right.
it was environmental. He was hanging on to something and validating it with keeping it in his space in his office. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so like he already knew and was ready to let it go and knew.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just here showing up and validating it. But one of the things I don't do for my clients is I don't put myself in the idle position. So I don't say, once I tell you this is the answer. I'm like, the answers. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
from the constellation standpoint, like, okay, like when someone's going through postpartum depression, from a German New Medicine standpoint, you're resolved, or you've already known, or you have the awareness is at the top or something for
Yeah,
what's
so
going
it gets
on.
a little more complicated.
Okay.
So we're talking about the two brain hemispheres. Now, I'm not an expert in this area, so
That's
I
okay.
can't speak on it as if I'm an expert can't even talk. But from what I know, I'm going to tell you what I know. So you have to have the two brain hemispheres. There has to be a conflict on both sides. Right.
Okay.
And so if there's a conflict on both sides in the same part of the hemisphere, or, the opposite sides of the hemisphere, you're actually going to be constellated, which is a constellation, which is going to cause an adaptation within the mental mind. So the way
Wow.
that you're acting and the way that you're being. So I have a theory.
Yeah, I like theories.
Yeah, so I have a theory, and I can't prove this. And of course, I'm relatively new to German New Medicine, so I mean, I'm sorry for all those that are like very seasoned. They're probably like, "What is she talking about?" But
Oh well, you probably have fresh eyes. You're bringing in.
I do. Yeah, sometimes it takes fresh eyes, right?
It does.
To like lead the path. So here's what happens in the body. If you have a constellation, so let's just say, let's say OCD. Okay. I'm not going to tell you which ones they are because they're all so different.
Yeah.
But you have two conflicts on each side of the hemisphere in order for you to have OCD tendencies, right?
Okay.
And so if we remove one of those conflicts, you no longer have the OCD going on, but now the adaptation within the body is going to start to become more predominant, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So you're almost looking, my thought process is that, like, let's say you have one, you're almost looking for the other one so that you have less adaptation going on. So let's act like it's a growth, a tumor. Okay. That's the conflict. So there's a conflict, and you have one of the old brain, programs that we're running. So we're growing tissue. Okay.
Yep.
So if we're growing tissue, that's going to be considered a tumor at a certain standpoint, like a certain size within medicine. So it's growing. So the body's whole idea is, hey, I want to keep you alive, right? Like we want to keep you alive. That's the whole point. So it's almost going to be looking for the other one, because when you get the other one to make you have OCD, right? So now we have OCD. So now we have a conflict on this side of the hemisphere. It's going to slow the adaptation within the body. So it's like, oh, maybe people that have mental disorders are actually like the last ditch effort of protective so they don't die. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Could it be a perception that they're going to die? Do you think?
No, because it's actually really happening. It's really and I'm not saying that they're going to die.
Wow.
But if you have a tumor that's growing in your intestines, yes, it could kill you. You need surgery to remove that tumor, right?
Yeah.
Like, or we got to downgrade that. We got to shed it. It has to come out somewhere. And so the body says, hey, she's like super conflicted, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. So we need to be on the hunt for this other conflict to slow that down. It's like a last ditch effort to slow down the process of it growing even further.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. So again, you start looking at the body as like, oh, maybe schizophrenia isn't a bad thing. Isn't that kind of hard? It's like really hard to like wrap it. Cancer is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Schizophrenia is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's really hard to go there because we've been
mental
trained.
Stuff is the hardest. Yeah.
Correct.
For me.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think others probably would have a harder trigger with cancer or something like that. Like with cancer, I'm like, we don't even know what that tumor is with modern medicine. Like diagnostics are real bad. I'm like, if I got a tumor and I show benign tumors on my device all the time in the fatty breast tissue of my stuff, just because right now I need to work on it. Like, I'm like, so what's so funny is people say, oh, you're so nonchalant about that. I'm like, yeah, because tumors are 96% beneficial, and then you throw the German New Medicine standpoint on here, they're probably 106% beneficial. Like I work in stats because I was in marketing, but tumors are like, they're gifts. Your body has generated cells there through mitosis too.
It's not a bad guy that came out of nowhere, like a boogie bad guy that
the cleanup crew. So if you actually tested one, got it out, dissected it, it would be parasites, microbes, bacteria. It would be
all the things that are
everything in the soil microbiome that's doing the cleansing. So that's what the renowned cancer doctor that trained me, he was a soil microbiologist. So he's like, we are soil. Like that's what we are. And so
we're germs.
He's like, so these tumors are like not a big deal. He's like, obviously they're a big deal if they're creating like blockages, problems, like, but they're a big deal, not to downplay them.
Some of them aren't. My dad would have been perfectly fine had he not known. They were not life-threatening to him.
No,
he would have never known. Yeah.
Right. Like he just believed. Like he's like, I know this to be true because I know it. I see women who've gone through chemo that research their cancers, and they would have only divided at a rate of like 2% every 40 years. Like you would have been fine.
Or zero. What is that called? Like zero breast cancer. What is it? I can't remember what they call that. Like level 0. It's like there's nothing there, but then they tell them that they still need to have their, a mastectomy.
And then you can deduce it down even further with the BRCA gene testing. I mean, some people are going to get triggered with that, but you're like, you don't even have it, and you're
Angelina Jolie just removing her breasts. Like it's outrageous. It's outrageous. So the breasts are a nest worry conflict. So depending on a nest worry conflict, so you're worried about somebody very important to you, but it depends on which side. So if you're a right-handed female, then on the left side of your breast is going to be your child that you're concerned with.
Interesting.
So you're going to grow tissue, you're going to build tissue, depending on if you're in the ducts or if you're going to be working on looking at like the actual breast tissue.
No, I'm
Yeah.
working in actual breast tissue for my personal self. And I'm really
Yeah.
interested because that makes total sense. Like that tracks for what I would be like dealing with. And it comes and goes like on my scans. And I'm not, again, the least bit worried. I'm not giving myself any kind of like diagnosis or anything. Do not care whatsoever. I'm just like, oh, interesting. I show a benign fatty tissue tumor there. Cool.
Yeah. So my dad, when he was dying, I think it was right after he'd passed. I can't remember. I had a thermography scan. I had so many symptoms. I went through some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I could talk about that in and of itself because I ran some tumor markers myself for pancreatic cancer just because like, oh, it's genetics, you know, all of these things. And they came back high.
No, it's resonance.
Yes.
Because you just dealt with that and connected with your dad in that on whatever level.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. So they came back high.
It's resonance.
So I spent the last 2 days not with my dad before he passed because I was so in my own mind freaking out that I had cancer too. So when I watched my dad and I saw him on the floor and he passed away and they're trying to revive him, I'm looking at him like I'm next. It's me. I'm next. Right. Talk about conflict shock. So here I am. I have a scan, right? I did a full thermography scan, which is, you know, good or bad, whatever, however you want to look at it. Depends on what it means to you. So when I did it, it gave me another conflict shock because guess what they found in my breast on the right side? There you go. Oh, it's super inflamed. I was nursing at the time. So they were like, well, it could be because you're breastfeeding. Thank God I was breastfeeding at the time because they would have been like, oh, you know, you probably have a tumor there. You need to go have a mammogram. You need to go do all these things. I was running the nest-worry conflict for my father.
Yes.
I had to break down that tissue. Right?
Isn't that so interesting how I just want y'all to know this because this is 100% what I've went through too with medical chaos. Isn't that interesting how depending on the day, the diagnosis will change? Like, I find that so interesting. Like, not to downplay what you went through, but it's like, oh, let me tell you, it's one way if you're nursing and one way if you're not. Y'all, the whole reason why I got out of medical care, well, I say the whole reason, but there's like 500 reasons. But one of the big convicting reasons with medical chaos happened for me so similar. I during COVID, I was categorized as a level 0 risk. So when you have a pacemaker and you have a heart situation, they follow you, you know, like you've either got to see them every 3 months, every 6 months, every once a year, whatever. And I was put into like, you're super healthy, no risk. Like we'll see you once a year for 15 minutes, call it a day category. And then after heart surgery. So I was that for 4 years. Then COVID happened. And of course I was that because everybody couldn't go in the hospital. And hell, if you weren't vaccinated, you definitely couldn't go in there.
Right.
And if you weren't wearing a mask, you definitely couldn't go in there. So I was like not invited, didn't see an EP for 2 years, which was a super gift. Didn't see EP for 2 years. Didn't see my cardiologist for 2 years.
Oh yeah.
Was going through a pregnancy, still didn't get seen. I mean, look, I have a pacemaker, so it's remote monitored from my house, which is like a whole caveat that I won't get into. But my thing with Wi-Fi, it's like, oh, Wi-Fi in the body. It's like when my kids tell me about being afraid, I'm like my son came home one day and he's like, did you know that there's like a transhuman agenda? I'm like, I'm living it, have a pacemaker, that's in my heart. Like, got it. Already doing that.
Yeah.
But that's part of the journey. So what's so funny is going through that, then 2021 rolls around, 22, get pregnant in 2021, have my second baby after this in 2022. Suddenly I was a risk. I was a category 4, like a category 3. It was upgraded to a category 3, needed to do all this fetal testing on baby because of XYZ. I'm like, AKA needs to recoup money from all the people they haven't seen from 2 years. Like I can't have suddenly become a risk after 6 years.
Yeah. Let's pull anything we can out of the hat. Right.
Yes. My midwives were at the time in a hospital setting. That's actually what gifted me into home birth, gifted me into this. We talk about gifts. They're in the hospital setting and they're like, we won't deliver without the fetal testing. I was like, then I'm going to home birth. Like, screw this. I was like, I'm not going to spend $42,000 of my cash flow to get a fetal echocardiogram when I know this baby does not have a heart problem because I know mine what it was. I had started studying like German new medicine, all that stuff. I'm like, my baby does not carry that conflict. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But wow, how freaking amazing. I mean, not amazing that your dad died, but how freaking beautiful of like a story. I think that's so
Find something
amazing.
out of it, right? Yeah.
Yes. I've
learn
seen
so
women
much.
come to me. The person that I talked about on the beginning of this podcast that had the aggressive cancer that had moved and moved and moved, but didn't, she couldn't save her sister from a breast cancer death. And I said to her, I really believe you're resonating. I believe that's how you're trying to connect, is through cancer. And I didn't have the verbiage around it like what you have and all that at the time, but I was like, there was no other reason for her to get a spontaneous cancer. But I mean, no, there was programming that she was running. I lie. Let me back up. That's not true. There was programming she was running to manifest the tumors. However, to believe in the cancer diagnosis, to the surgeries, to the deaths, there was not, the emotional disturbance there was wanting to resonate with her sister. I know that for sure. Like, why, it's like, why did you adopt the belief system? Well, you adopted it because same reason you did, same reason I did. I adopted the belief system that I was going to be bipolar, because from the time I was 3, everybody in my family would say, you're just like your mother. You're just like your mother. And I'm like, oh, must be just like her.
Yeah. So you would look for the same conflicts in order to have that.
All the time. Men, divorce. I mean, I married the same conflicts. You know what I mean? Like once and hostile, and put myself in all those environments. Like, and what happened? They manifested the same challenges.
So the biggest thing, I think that you would agree with this on a like frequency level, is cancer patients. Man, they do such a good job in oncology world of keeping you in that loop, right? And I had a client recently that, God, it was really hard to say this to her, but I was like, you're benefiting from having cancer. You know, it's like, what are you getting out of it? And so those people that keep getting reoccurring cancer, right? Either it shows up here, there, wherever, it's their identity. It's what they hold on to. Why? Why do you need that label? What is it giving you? What's the gift that it's giving you in order to have that? Well, a lot of these people didn't have attention, right? They're seeking something. And then you go to oncology, they butter your butt. They pat you like there's no tomorrow. Are you okay? Do you want this? Do you want that? You know, like they're getting something that the human needs, the humans desire. Like we desire attention. We have to have attention, otherwise we die. Look at the babies that are left in the crib. They die, right? Whole nother segue we could talk about.
It's like, here's the rabbit hole.
But they need to hear that. And that's that harsh, like where you get into the psyche, and it's like, then they realize, holy crap, do I really have to have this attention anymore? Like, why do I even label myself this anymore? Like that's the point, right? Because the body, psyche, the body, the brain, everything is telling you like, hey, you need this. You got it. We're going to give it to you. Here you go. This is what you desire. This was my dad. He needed attention so bad. He was starving in very specific ways, right? He had his needs met. As soon as he got it, there he got it. It was like, and he was so calm. So calm. It was like that's all he needed. And so that was the hill he died on. He didn't care. He was, cool, I got what I wanted, got what I needed.
We've seen it over and over. We saw it with my husband's dad recently. He needed nurture. He needed attention. He got hospitalized with a cardiac issue, and he's thrilled with all the care, loves it so much, was showered with praise and attention. Every follow-up visit, showered with praise and attention. I mean, I've seen on a micro level with myself. I would get on a weird level attention in the ER for anxiety that I never got as a kid, wasn't getting from my husband, wasn't getting from my ex-husband, like on a weird level would get that because somebody would, even though people go, why would you want that? That involves like IVs and all that stuff. You don't care. The person will take it however they can get it. It's the same as people, kids love their crackhead parents. Like I say that
die for attention.
I'm like, we don't care. We'll just die for attention. It's so true. And especially if we don't know ourselves, we don't know thyself, like it says in the Bible, our identity is not in Jesus Christ, then we will 100% be looking for that in something else. I see that so much. I see a real hard thing. You know, I love how you're cutthroat about this, because this is a great way to healing for sure. But a real hard things is like moms needing sick kids, moms
Mm-hmm.
validating
Mm-hmm.
their motherhood with sick kids. I do so much
Yep.
peds in my practice, and
Yep.
I never take kids birth through 7 without mama ever. Like I
Yeah.
do not even take them on. I'm
Yeah.
like, sorry, not allowed. If you're not willing to do
Yeah.
your work, then we can't move forward here.
Yeah.
And most of it is so micro. Most of it is so interesting, and you can set yourself free from it. I mean, when my daughter was having indigestible morsel conflicts and all that stuff, it was like she needed me. She needed nurture. She needed me to
Yep.
forgive myself for the vaccinating, the drinking while I was pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm
Yep.
just laying it out there because it's true. This is
Yeah.
the,
The
dirty
truth.
side that we don't always get to put on social media. That's why I love
Right.
podcasting. It's like she needed me and me to forgive myself, me to come bring that nurture back to her. Like I would say stuff like, I realized like she wouldn't hug me like ever. Like we hadn't hugged in like 4 years, and she's
Mm-hmm.
16 almost. So, I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
guys, she wasn't a baby, but every disconnect that I could do when she was little was done. She was not nursed. She was slept like.
But you see the gift in the kid. You see the gift that
you
kids give
see
you.
it. It's so
right?
freaking amazing.
Especially mother-daughter. Man, that is the most complicated relationship on the planet. I'm telling you right now. You can have so many conflicts just based off of that. And I have a daughter
100%.
too. So, yeah.
Yes, my naturopath was like, you need to go be that mama. I see it all the time. I'll have clients call me with, well, what I call like peds crises. Like, let's say their baby's really sick or having like a viral expression or, whatever. Sometimes it's like a blood sugar issue, whatever. And they'll say, what do I do? I'm like, listen, it's always your choice. If you want to go to the ER, that's fine. But you can also just look at that kid and decide right now that you can give it what it needs. Like I had one situation that was so interesting. I love when I get high intuitive kids. Like I just love that. So because kids always know, they're almost all high intuitive unless we shut it down. This beautiful mom hasn't shut anything down, but she also has done her own healing over the last 2 or 3 years, which I commend. So it's like touch and go when you're doing your own healing. I get it. Like she's like fully aware. Like her kid said the funniest thing. She said, all the magic came into the world. And then she said on this date, and it was her birthday. And it was so funny that she said that. She randomly said it. And this was the weirdest thing. You'll love this from German New Medicine standpoint. So she has had a diabetes diagnosis. I do not believe the kid has diabetes for a second, but the kid has had one. And now we know it was like high conflict resolution stuff. But anyway, she said that. And, normal mom stuff, we don't seize every moment. I get it. But I happen to be on the phone and the mom's just like, yeah. And I get that too. We're mothering. Like, I'm not saying that you don't do things with your kids. It was so funny. Next day, that night, blood sugar shoots up. Like I'm talking extreme crisis. Like it was weird. But then the mom had told me that day, because I said to her, you really should tell her she's right. And you're not going to miss that ever again. Like some version of that. Like, right. Like just validate that, because I felt on my spirit it was really big for that kid. And she did that. And then I find it so interesting, even now that we've talked, that this kid just has this high
sugar spike.
healing.
Yeah. So that's that resolution right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, woo!
So diabetes is a fear disgust. Yeah. It's a fear disgust conflict. So there was something that she was fearful of and disgusted by. It has to be those two met together. And so once that happens, you mess with the beta cells and, the pancreas, and then we have, the diabetes diagnosis, and then you'll have that flux, right? And so the hanging healing is when you're labeled diabetic, when you keep going back and forth between the blood sugar spikes. But the healing phase is the blood sugar spike, where the insulin goes right up.
Isn't that so interesting? And then I always want to know,
supposed to finish out.
Through, I guess you just resolve the emotional. And I have always said to this beautiful mom, I'm like, you'll get through. We can't force win, but I'm like, if you stay in the vibe and you keep doing the work, like obviously you're going to get through. Like she's going to get through. Like it's like I had no doubt in my mind, because I can visually back up the fact that she's not resonating with diabetes anymore. Like I can visually see that on my scans.
Get rid of the
that's
label.
Something that I would say, you don't have diabetes, because that's not a part of my depth of practice. But what I'm saying is, and I'm also fully aware and sensitive to the fact that sometimes we intervene with devices as someone with a pacemaker, and as multiple interventions, and as, things you wear to control your blood sugar. I get it. Like I get all the interventions, but you look at the cascade of that and you're like, wow, gets out of hand really fast.
Oh, it sure does. Yeah. Well, it's all a track. It's a trigger, right? And so a lot of like, you know, the smartwatches or like the devices, I get clients that are like, oh, I'm ovulating. Oh, crap, I didn't ovulate. It's just a reminder. It's a reminder all the time. Just a constant reminder that like something's wrong with you. You didn't do what you're supposed to do. It keeps you in the conflict all the time. Oh man, my blood pressure went skyrocket. Wow, I don't feel good. Oh my gosh, what's going on? You know, it's like, well, you know, maybe you wouldn't have even worried about it if you wouldn't have even known.
That
Yeah.
is an interesting perspective. I'm constantly telling my clients don't track anything. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe just don't take your blood pressure, like in your
Yeah.
blood pressure results. Like,
For some people it brings them clarity, you know, like symptom journaling. For some people it makes them feel, but other people you can't. So everybody's just so individually different. You know, if you're somebody that's really nervous about things like this, it's probably not a good thing to go get blood work done because you're going to anticipate having a bad result, you know?
totally. That's the deep work you have to work on. And it's cyclical in phases in your life too. I always say this all the time. I'm so grateful for functional medicine labs because at the height of my analytical brain and in the masculine, I really needed those labs to convict myself that some work needed to be done.
Yep. And as soon as you did it, it made you feel better.
Genuinely. I was like, it made me feel better. And it opened up this door to all this too, because even though I was mad that they were so dysfunctional looking, I still explored the body and figured out what to do. And I say that all
you
the
got
time.
an answer.
Someone would say that again. Sorry.
You got an answer.
Yes. It was like, whoa, great.
Not having an answer is so scary in this world, right?
It is. And having everyone else's answers is like the higher chaos.
That's why I only work individually. I really can't do it otherwise. You know, like in a coursework, it's just never going to work out that way to do this type of work. You know, where one-on-one is where you really hit where people need. You know, everybody is so individually different. Talking about, you know, like an overall arching theme, you know, like health anxiety is a different process that you can actually reach the masses with. But when you're talking about working with people one-on-one, you know, if I was working with you now, I would be like, oh no, let's not track, let's not test, because it's not helping you. But back then I would have had to tell you, yeah, you better go get that blood work done. You better go do it. You better go do it.
You've really got to figure out what phase they're in and how high anxiety and all that stuff. That's so true. I only do one-on-one work too. Like, I mean, I even actually recently I'm going to pull so like I said, I use minerals and coffee as a couple things to raise body energy so people can become aware, because some people are just so blocked with their interventions.
Oh yeah. If you're so low in minerals, you can't even go there.
You can't even process.
Not at all.
That's what happened to me. I couldn't even process. I couldn't pull myself out of anxiety and adrenal issues long enough to even understand how to explore outside of what my functional medicine doctor was saying. And someone saying to me, oh, well, it makes sense because you've been through trauma for 10 years didn't help. Like, I was like, okay, well, what's the solution? Like, you know, and that was how this was kind of born, because they didn't have one. But what's so fascinating about that is I'm going to pull my Living Healed Raise Your Res out from behind the paywall, because I actually want everybody to do it. I'm like, do it. Raise your body vibration before. That's something I can tell you. If you do get your body computing better, you will get more awareness. I can tell you that. I don't need to, you know, I don't need to work that in.
What we would call that is becoming more biologically normal.
Yeah.
You know, so like coming back to homeostasis, coming back to what's biologically normal. So what's biologically normal? GMOs? No. Seed oils? No. You know, like plastics? No. Like, so the more we remove that stuff, absolutely, you're going to become more in sync with your body, 100%. But it's not the end all be all, right? It's not going to kill you to have a little bit of plastic in you. Your body has the discernment of understanding when it's time to like put the plastic away or put the GMOs down. You know, it's going to tell you.
People ask us about our water filtration, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, we have a distiller, so we can have medicinal water. I have 3 kids who hate the taste of distilled water, of course. So we also buy in spring water in plastic bottles and put it into freaking a glass dispenser that sits on our counter, and it's cheaper for us than to have a whole foam filter right now. I'm like, I get it. I understand holistic community can shun me for it, but whatever. Like,
it's what you make it to be. It's what you make it to be. Yeah,
it is. And you can force yourself into processing. I mean, my body literally just told me the other day, like, I was like, I can actually tell my body to burn fat. Like, I can tell my body that. Like, You know,
It's
like
just,
obviously if
it's a
I'm letting,
bucket
yeah, like I'm like, if I'm letting
it's a
them
bucket of minerals, right? And so like you're spending them. So you got to think like, I only have so much. Where am I going to
yep.
spend these? That's the
That's so
thing.
amazing. I'm like, I have thoroughly enjoyed having this entire conversation. I feel like I could write down like 8 topics that we need to go
Yeah.
on to
Well, I
for
can always
sure.
come back. Yeah. There's plenty to
No,
talk
please.
about.
I love repeat. I love repeat. And I'm excited for you to get your podcast started too. So
Yeah, me too.
since you do one-on-ones, I will drive, people to the show notes. And like, if anybody
Sure.
obviously wants to go deeper in this and resonate, I love that. I can't take all the people. It's like, I can,
Oh yeah, me either. I have to refer out too.
I know, and I'm like, anybody who's doing mind body medicine, I'm like game on. Like people always ask
Yeah.
me, can you refer me to somebody? And depending on what they're wanting, I'm like, sometimes I can't even refer them because I
Yeah.
just built this little crew of people who I'm like, hey, if you're doing mind body medicine, like you're in. If not, you're out. Like you have
Yeah.
to have some kind of knowledge of that. Only because I want people to get lasting results. Like
Right.
when God kind of downloaded the whole concept of living healed to me, like how do we live in a state of healed? He didn't download it as like holistic perfection. Like it wasn't like that. It was like, okay,
That's
how do we
huge.
live in a state where we're not in chaos and we're in peace, love, and harmony? And that was what I
Yeah.
really chased after.
Nice.
And it's interesting because I'm like, the tendency when you have so much going on and so many kids, all of that is so wired against that. Like the world is just like, oh, you can't do that. It's not possible, So I actually ended up being like, in my logic brain, just being like, the absolute only reason to pull that off has to be mindset. Like there has to be something to that. Like I'm like,
Yeah.
there is no other way to pull that off because you can't control 100% of your environment. I know that. My divorce taught me that. I live that every single day. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you cannot, even if you didn't live it, and somebody thinks they can, they can't. The people who can are seriously missing out on some of the gifts when you don't control your whole environment. Like, and it's just like sometimes doing that, like when we got into debt, I thought it was smart debt. I knew God would like restore it, but it hasn't been easy. Like I'm like, like who knows who would have done it again? Like I said, I told a little bit of that story, but if you guys want to do the deep work and renew the mind, then obviously Brienne's your girl. She's like,
Oh, thank you. Yeah. If you're willing to take a beating, come to
I'm like,
me.
that's how I am.
Yeah.
I'm like, Mike, I have clients who like, I'll be like, if you don't need to if you don't want to speak to me for 2 weeks after this, or if you want to process this,
Oh,
go for it.
absolutely.
But I'm not going to
Yeah.
hold back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Because
just
if
going
you
to
want to
straight
see
tell
lasting
you.
results, we got to get there. We can't just
Yeah.
beat around the bush anymore.
No, I tell people all the time, I'm like, you're playing the victim. Like
Yeah.
you are
Yeah.
operating in a huge victimhood. Like,
Yep.
and funny enough, you can't even access the thought processes behind German New Medicine if you're playing the victim to your symptoms. There's no
Yeah.
way. It's
Well, here's the thing. Sooner or later, they're going to see that as a gift. The harsh. Everybody sees it as a gift sooner or later. They may
they
not
do.
see it when you're working with them, but they will see it later.
No, they do. I have
Everybody
people
sees
message
it.
me all the time, and they're like,
Yeah.
without you saying that, I would have been blah blah blah. Even
Yeah.
people who quit in the middle.
Yeah. Quit
Trying to
working with
offer
you.
any refunds. You know what I'm saying? People who exit stage
Yeah.
left and don't want it will still often message me and say like, so today I had this moment where I was thinking about
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fine. I don't need to be everybody's Holy Spirit. I just need to be the catalyst for change.
Right.
Like I'm
Right.
good.
Yeah. And so like you're giving a lasting gift. I always think of it that way. Like I'm giving a really intense lasting gift here. And if you don't see it right now, that's totally fine. It's not the right time for you to see it, but you will see it eventually. And I don't care if I'm around for you to like witness it. It was just a gift to give to you, right? Like it was a selfless gift for me to give that to you. And it doesn't feel like it at the time. It feels like a slap across the face. So it's not a fun feeling. And I've had to check myself too. I mean, I have to go through my own work where I have to check myself. We all have to.
Totally.
We have to live it. And if you're working with somebody that doesn't live what they're talking and preaching and doing, I can't like steer you in the direction to go somewhere different, but I would tell you to. I mean, you have to work with somebody that's actually believes in what they're talking about and doing what you say. If you're believing in frequencies, you need to be believing in doing frequencies work yourself,
Yep.
And so it's important to pay attention to that.
It is. I mean, it's interesting. I always tell people too, like in the 8 weeks that people work with me, hope to lay down a foundation for how you renew the mind, for how you live.
Yeah.
Like, I hope to lay down the foundation. We can't always unpack all the layers. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm like,
Right.
this has been 8 years of work. Like, it's another reason why when I consult, I'm like, I mean, a membership community is a good idea for providers, because if someone wants to stay in that vein of thought and not get into the chaos of provider hopping, not that you can't get external influence, but I see it all the time. Somebody will land on a vein that works, and when it's time to do the work, they'll provider hop or they'll chaos.
That's what my new course is going to be about. Health anxiety,
Yes.
constantly chasing, needing to be handheld all the time. It's like ditching that mindset and that way that you're looking at things and the way you view that you're on this hamster wheel, constantly trying to find something new and what's wrong with me, and staying in the system. You're staying in that system. It is a blessing to you at that time, but why are you in it? If you really want to exit it, then you have to look at the good in it. You have to find, why am I staying in this mindset? Why do I keep honing in on my stomach aches? What are they giving me? What is the gift behind that? What is the good behind it? And then once you find that, you realize, oh crap, I don't really need them anymore. It takes like the curtain away, right? Like we push the curtain back and you see the wizard, and the wizard is you, and you're the bad guy. You're the person, and you see that and you're like, oh man, my tricks are gone, like my cards are laid down, my tricks are done. And I have to look at it and say, like, I guess I really don't need this anymore. Or, yeah, I want that. I need that. I'm going to keep on hanging on to that. But I know the truth. It always kind of runs its little course because it gets over knowing the truth. You realize, like, you're the boogeyman.
So true. So true. I mean, this course is going to be badass, to be honest. I'm so excited about it. I feel like I laid some of that out in like Living Healed, but I definitely on my one-on-ones are telling people, I'm like, just the pursuit of always needing to get healthy is the unsettled. Like you're constantly unsettled. Like you're furthering fight or flight. Like all these influencers like, cortisol, fight or flight, let me help you get out of it. I'm like, you're literally telling them to stay in it. Like by telling them, I mean, not all of them. There's a couple out there that are doing badass work and I love them, like Sarah Kleiner Wellness, and a couple that are like really just talking about the basics. But I'm like, there's others that I have found even in my own, let's just say, okay, in my own life, let's say if in my own life, my ex-husband is ramping up chaos and I can sense it. Like if that has been a default comfort for me through childhood, I can find that suddenly I'm like, why is my internet algorithm like stuff I can't stand? And then recently I had like a resurgence of like headaches, like post-delivery, I had a migraine and I had some headaches. And I know it is when I am participating in chaos. I know that. Like, I'm like, I know that. And there's like 1 or 2 influencers that I'm like, why haven't I just hit that unfollow button yet? And it's sometimes it's that simple, right? You're like, why do I want to come back here and feel pissed off? Like I know everything you post is going to be annoying. Why do I want my liver to be jacked up because of you today? Like I don't, you know what I mean?
So the best part of that is just totally removing that that's a bad thing and seeing it as a curious thing and being like, oh, interesting. Like interesting that I keep resulting back to these types of movies and this type of content and these types of people and these friends that I keep wanting to hang out with and this music that I listen to. But it all paints a picture. It's all trying to tell you something. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that's who you are.
Staying in that state of awe and wonder. I teach my clients that all the time. I'm like, don't feel angry. Don't feel fascinated. Feel curious. Like awe and wonder. We cannot get quick clarity without questions. I'm like, I'm so thankful for my big sales career. And I always say we're stuck in sales funnels. You call it looping. It's like the same thing, right? Because it's like they've taken the best of that and figured out how to generate a machine of sales. Like it makes sense. And I'm like, I used to do that.
It works.
I get it. It works. If you can just tell somebody 100 different times what they need or how broken they are, they'll buy it. Like
it's like the powers to be know what they're doing.
Oh, they for sure do. I could wrap
I know.
But
the more you learn.
Grateful for you coming on, and I guess I will wrap it up because I have a Thanksgiving dinner to get to at my kids' school.
Oh yeah, congrats! That's exciting.
It'll be fun. I mean, I'll be really honest with you guys. I'm like running in at the tail last minute, but I'm so glad that you came on. And I want to send people. So send me I know you'll send me the best way to contact you, but I just want to tell everybody I'll put that in the show notes. down
Yes.
below. So
Yeah, of course. So Instagram, QB_wellness mama. And then my website is Redbird Wellness. I really don't even work off of my website. I am not a tech person. So if you want to see my content, it's Instagram.
yep.
And mostly stories because I just have so much to spout off about. So anyways, thank you for having me. I will get you all of that information. And I want to come back. Let's talk again. It's been a lot of fun.
Gosh, let's do a big old gender talk. Let's do
Oh yeah. We'll stay on topic this time.
I want to hear more about that with German New Medicine for sure. Like
Yeah,
I'm like, oh, if I can
absolutely.
like pick up some tendencies or collaborate and set some of these women free, like that's truly my passion too. I have done to get a lot of data. I wanted to do a lot of people with chronics and I enjoy it, but my real passion is this, attack on women, women's unworthiness, like creation, like why are we so convinced we can't create? That makes no sense.
Oh
Like
yeah, you need to know this then.
It's such
This
a
is
magnificent, it is fascinating. Every time I have another baby, and I don't want any more at all. I don't want to birth again, but every time I have another baby, I am so floored with the miraculous again. You know what I mean? And I'm like, it's like, it's this insane thing that you just cannot wrap your brain around. Like this, you grow this whole, like even my 9-year-old's like, can you believe you grew that like mini version of a real person?
Yeah, right.
It is way fascinating when you think,
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and that's what we're designed to do. Yep, that's
so
what we're
amazing.
supposed to be.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to end this and I hope you have an amazing day and I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
In stream. Okay.